illusion of choice. Do you know that only 6 corporations own 90% of the American media? The most powerful special interest group in Washington is the media. The media is the gateway of information to the American public, and any politician strives to reach the public through the media. Thus, the media have a great say in which politician is granted a voice. To provide a historical perspective, in 1983, 90% of the American media was controlled by 50 companies. Through a history of mergers and acquisitions, these companies have concentrated their control over what we see, hear, and read. In many cases, these companies control everything, from initial production to final distribution. Now only 6 companies own 90% of our media. Our main source of information and cultural output is coming from these 6 giant conglomerates: Comcast, News Corp, Disney, Viacom, Time Warner, and CBS. Profit maximization is the ultimate goal of every corporation. And if that goal becomes entangled with reporting the truth in the news, what will ultimately win out? What happens when there is no one left to compete with? When one company owns everything in your town, does the people in your town have a voice in their media anymore? Would they hear or watch content that is relevant to their lives? Probably not. The more independent media outlets a community has, the more different viewpoints will be presented on air. And the question that arises, do we really have a choice in our media?
As a public service, TV Free Baltimore provides a digital soapbox for those the mainstream media ignores. The opinions expressed in this live stream are not necessarily those of the owners, management, or underwriters of TV Free Baltimore. Furthermore, TV Free Baltimore streams hyper-local content focusing on politics and entertainment in the Baltimore viewing area.
Streaming live from the Paul and Catherine Ranke Memorial Studio, this is TV Free Baltimore. Support for TV Free Baltimore comes from viewers like you. Become a TV Free Baltimore member by visiting patreon.com/tvfreebaltimore.
Guys, we were in a car crash. No one was hurt, but due to the accident, TV Free's live stream for May the 5th had to be canceled. Here's the story. We traveled to Hagerstown to cover the Maryland International Film Festival on Friday, April the 27th, and had a great time at the event. As we traveled back towards Baltimore on Route 70 at about 2 a.m. in the morning, a deer jumped out in front of the car. As we collided with the deer, we were traveling at about 70 miles an hour. Now again, we were not hurt, but the car obviously needs to be repaired. With that said, the local deer population must be increasing as the number of deer carcasses on the side of 695, 95, and 70 appears to be increasing, which leads one to believe there's an increasing number of people colliding with deer. However, the local media doesn't seem to be warning us about this dangerous situation, and I wonder why. Well, one could argue the mainstream media's anti-gun agenda doesn't allow stories about hunting deer, particularly with guns. Showing hunters in a positive light would show guns in a positive light, which undermines the mainstream media's anti-Second Amendment stance. One can also argue the local media's reporting could lead a Martian to think Maryland is a landlocked state. You very rarely see local media covering stories about hunting, fishing, camping, or other outdoor activities, despite the fact we have the Atlantic Ocean, the Chesapeake Bay, and so many other great outdoor areas. There was a time when WMAR featured Bill Burton, who would stand in front of a green screen like a weatherman and discuss the hot spots to fish. We here at TV Free Baltimore want to bring this type of local programming back. Maryland's outdoors should be celebrated and explored. Another thing which should also be celebrated is the local film community, which brings me to the Maryland International Film Festival we attended in Hagerstown. The festival featured a film entitled Butterfly Kisses, which won several awards. Although the local media in Western Maryland covered the event, the media in Baltimore was all but silent about the festival. However, we've interviewed the writer-director of the film Butterfly Kisses, which you'll see in this stream. His interview will be followed by an interview with the Baltimore production designer Chester Stacy, which is another conversation you're not going to want to miss. That will be the entertainment portion of today's stream, and now it's time to move on to politics, as Maryland's primary is only 37 days away. If you live in District 8 in northeast Baltimore County, which includes Parkville, Kearney, Perry Hall, White Marsh, Glenarm, and Fork, you'll want to stay tuned. We interview House of Delegates candidate Republican Kevin Leary. If you live in the southwest corner of Baltimore County, in District 12, you too will want to stay tuned. We've interviewed Lansdowne resident Joe Howe, who's running for state senate as a Republican. Before we stream those interviews, I want to discuss the book Baltimore Unbound, which I said I would review in the April 8th live stream. Baltimore Unbound is the manifesto used by the NAACP, ACLU, and the ABLE Foundation in their attempt to transform Baltimore County into the new Baltimore City. This book is racist, authoritarian, and will not fix the problems in Baltimore City, but will create new problems in Baltimore County. The author, David Rusk, argues all of Baltimore City's problems, real and imagined, are caused by a hyper-concentration of black poverty within the political boundaries of Baltimore City. His solution to the city's problem is to move poor blacks from the worst neighborhoods in the city to the best neighborhoods in the surrounding counties. If you are poor and white, or any other skin color for that matter, you need not apply for this program, which is blatantly racist. The first page of the book remarks legal action may be necessary to bring this program into reality. In other words, the courts would force this program onto those that don't want it and force county residents to pay for the program through higher property taxes, which is blatantly authoritarian. The blatant racism and authoritarianism should not come as a surprise after looking at the author's background. He's another Democrat calling for the redistribution of wealth via higher taxes and the equality of outcome via greater government intervention into our lives. I found a letter to the editor of the Sun Papers dated November the 1st, 1995, which is interesting because the author mentions Lansdowne, Maryland, and its working culture. I'll leave a link below so you can read it yourself. But he discusses the cultural differences between those living in Lansdowne, Maryland, and those Rusk proposes to move into places like Lansdowne. I also found an episode of Midday with Dan Rodricks, where he interviews David Rusk. I'll leave the link to that show below as well. With that said, I'll end my commentary with a recommendation that you read Baltimore Unbound so you too can ponder how those in positions of influence and power could embrace such ideas and how that embrace will affect you, your families, and your community. Enjoy the stream.
In all of freedom's history, there has never been an organization quite like the National Rifle Association of America. No other people are so alert, so vigilant, so unafraid to take a stand and go out and fight for what's good and right. We, the people of the National Rifle Association, represent the very best of America's strength and of America's character.
I run an educational media company. We produce 5-minute videos about different topics we believe that the world should be aware of. We produce videos about history, political science, just anything that we believe would make a person whole and more knowledgeable and savvy in this world.
about 35 PragerU videos are currently restricted.
When we first realized that our videos were being restricted, there were about 15 videos that were restricted, and that was a year and a half ago. And since then, not only has the issue not been resolved, there's actually been 20 more videos restricted. And currently, it's closer to 40 videos that are being restricted. And after nothing really happening for weeks and weeks, we kept pressing them, and then they eventually told us, well, after reviewing your videos, we determined they're not appropriate for a young audience, which was really troubling to us at PragerU, because if you've seen any of our videos, they're very educational and they're very appropriate for a young audience.
They have placed our videos on their restricted list. That means that it can't be viewed in libraries, in schools, or any home that filters out pornography, for example. Cannot be seen in any of those places. Our videos are as innocent as exists on the internet. 4 Pulitzer Prize winners, professors from Stanford, MIT, Harvard, Yale, and they still said inappropriate, but we still don't understand why.
You think when you Google something, everything on that subject comes up. I mean, it's in their mission statement. They say we organize the information of the world and make it universally accessible to all. They don't do that because they don't make ours accessible.
When I learned YouTube had been denying access to its platform to PragerU's videos, I said, I think the only way you're going to get honest answers and gain the access that the First Amendment would require is if, in fact, you start getting people through discovery in a lawsuit.
I almost feel like we're being bullied because being silenced is such a frustrating feeling. This is not just about PragerU being silenced. This is about another point of view that is being silenced. Tomorrow it's going to be your point of view that's being silenced.
Is Google the one who gets to decide what everybody gets to watch?
Hi. Hi. I'm Dawn Wells, and guess what? You are watching TV Free Baltimore.
This is my jump shot.
Trash ball, I need pain. Everybody wins, let me show you how to play. When you pick up some trash, pretend it's a ball, and then you throw it in the bucket, you're playing a trash ball. A jump shot hook, you gotta put it away. We're gonna play that trash ball every day.
Come on, Baltimore, play ball and keep it clean.
You're watching Maryland Politics here on TV Free Baltimore.
Hello, this is Paul Stefan, and welcome again to another edition of TV Free Baltimore's Maryland Politics. Today's guest is Kevin Leary. He is running as a Republican in District 8 for the House of Delegates. Welcome, Kevin.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Now, tell us a little bit about you and your background.
Okay. I'm a lifelong Baltimore County resident. I grew up in Dundalk. I graduated in 1989 from Patapsco High School over there off of Wise Avenue. And after I got out of high school, I joined the military at 17 years old. And I came out of the military and joined the police department. I joined the Maryland Transportation Authority Police Department. And in 2006, left the police department for medical reasons and started working in the insurance and investigation field as a fraud and abuse investigator. Okay. And now I currently am part owner of a small business over in the Essex area.
Okay, and what is the business, can you say?
It's called Maryland Executive Protection and Investigations.
Okay. Is it private investigation?
Yes,
firm?
we do. We do private investigations. We also do some accident investigations for some of the larger insurance companies.
From insurance companies, okay. It's not like the client hires you or the lawyer hires you to look into things.
Every once in a while, we'll get a case like that, but for the most part, it's for
insurance companies.
A major. Well, we have a contract with a major company.
Okay, don't leave their name
yeah,
in. Don't tell their name. We're not giving them an ad.
I will not.
But anyway, but you are trying to represent District 8.
Correct.
And for those of us, including me, who don't have a lot of familiarity with that, where is Section 8 and what does it encompass geographically?
Okay. A basic geographic map of District 8 is from Philadelphia Road on the east side, from the city line up to Joppa Road, and then all the way over to Perring Parkway.
Okay.
So once you get up to the Joppa Road area, the top of the district, it's kind of jagged the way it's cut.
Up in there.
It's an odd cut.
As most of the
at
districts
top.
are in Maryland.
Correct.
As we know, that needs to be redistricting again.
Correct. So basically, it's from Joppa Road south on
Down to
the
Philadelphia.
east end, all the way to the city line.
Oh, all right. I'll see. Okay.
Down Philadelphia Road, and then
gotcha.
all the way around to Perring Parkway and down to the city line.
Okay, so it would encompass Golden Ring? Or?
It encompasses Parkville, Perry Hall, White Marsh, Overley, Hillendale.
It's quite a district.
Rosedale.
Yeah.
It's a lot of different district area.
And is it also very varied demographically or no?
Yes. Yes.
From people who maybe have, working class up to, white collar, that kind of thing?
Correct. Like the upper end and up Perry Hall area, there's a whole lot of white collar type and blue collar. I mean, it's a good mix.
And White Marsh too.
White Marsh as well. There's a good mix of both.
Okay. Pretty
much scattered throughout. Parkville and Overley is a lot more, blue collar, and Rosedale as well. But it's really a really well mixed.
Well, it's interesting. It almost sounds like it could be a nice little microcosm of Maryland in miniature. I mean,
it actually could. It actually could.
That's kind of looks like to me. Now, of course, is this your first time running for public office?
This is my first time running officially.
Officially? What does that mean? How did you run unofficially?
In 2014, I had announced that I was going to run, but then with my dad's medical issues and my youngest son graduating high school, I just didn't have time to follow through with it.
Okay. And along with that, so what made you decide at that point in your life, 4 years ago even now, to say, hey, I'm going to try politics?
Well, I've been involved with the community, so I've seen a lot going on since the last 20 years to where it's just deteriorating in Baltimore County, and it's bad. The crime's getting bad. The schools are getting bad. We used to have the best schools, and now they're just like not all that great. I mean, they're not. Right. There's a whole lot of discipline issues. There's a whole lot. I've been working with families and teachers and SROs, and it's just hearing some of the stuff that's going on in the schools has made me want to try to make some changes, try to help and make some changes so our kids can go to school and not feel threatened, so they can have a safe place to learn without fear and anxiety.
Okay, now, you talked about involved with the community. Have you been involved with community organizations over the years, or no?
I've been involved with my homeowners association and stuff like that, but I've been involved with some of the local politicians and trying to help them with some bills and help them raise money, basically, and try to get the right people elected.
So you've worked for a few campaigns.
I volunteered for a few campaigns. I wouldn't call it as like full-time working for the campaigns. I've helped out.
Pay you, no.
Right. Well, I've helped out. I couldn't be in, working. And,
with your full-time job.
Right. I couldn't just drop my full-time job and go full-time campaigning.
Right. Now, again, not knowing, and most of the people who watch are not going to know your district, what is the composition now? The three representatives, which I guess you have three in Section 8. Are they Democrats? Are they Republicans? Who are they?
Well, we have two Republicans, Christian Mealy and Joe Cluster. I keep getting him mixed up with his dad.
Okay.
And then there's a Democrat, Eric Bromwell, in the House of Delegates. And we have Kathy Clausmeyer as our senator.
Okay. Now, have these people all been in there for a while, or what's, or are they one-termers, or what are they?
No, actually, Kathy Clausmeyer's been in there for many years.
As a state senator?
As a state senator.
Okay.
Eric Bromwell's been in, I believe, for 12 years, if I'm not mistaken.
So 3 terms.
And Christian just won in 2014.
So he was new.
And Joe took over his dad's seat, John Cluster, when John was, I think he was appointed to the Parole Commission by the governor.
So you're saying he got that appointed? Or
He was appointed.
He did not win
midterm.
the seat?
He was appointed midterm.
Gotcha. So really you have, it's up for grabs in a way.
Well, Joe does a great job.
Oh, does he?
Yeah,
Okay.
Joe does a great job, as does Christian.
Okay, they all do good jobs.
Yeah.
Okay. So where is there room for Kevin Leary?
Well, Joe and Christian do a good job.
Okay. The other gentlemen, no.
Well, the community is looking for new ideas and change. They are not looking. I speak to a lot of people while I'm out in the community, and everybody is looking for new ideas to try to make our community safer and to make things better for everybody, not just a particular demographic or anything. They want everybody to feel safe. They want everybody to live better in Baltimore County. And the same old ideas are just not cutting it.
Well, I know, again, you talked about the mix in that district. Even that, it's split. You have 2 Republicans and 1 Democrat. It's not like some of them, like here in the 12th, you'll have 3 Democrats.
Correct.
And a Democratic senator. It's like all blue.
Well, and I'll point to in 2014 in District 6, where the Democrats were completely swept, and now it's all Republican.
Well, there you go.
So that just shows you the eastern side of Baltimore County is tired of politics as usual,
Good. It's
and they want
changing.
They want change.
It's changing, yeah. So that's good to know. I know that it looked to me when I looked up Maryland Board of Election results that in 2014 it was rather simple. 3 Republicans ran for nomination, so those 3 Republicans were automatically in the general election. Now this time there are 7 of you.
Yes.
What made that difference in 4 years?
I think the fact that in 2014 there was only 1 open seat, and now there's 2, basically on the Republican. As we look at it, there's 2 seats to go after. Christian is going to go over to Senate and run against Kathy. And then we have Eric Bromwell that we, would like to replace.
Now the problem is with 7 of you, and only maybe 1 or 2 of those 7s, which aren't really great odds, they're going to get in there. Where do you see, or how do you handicap your chances, and how do you stand out from the group?
Well, I think as a small business owner and I'm just an everyday average person. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a politician. I'm not. I'm a business owner. I try to help people, and I think I honestly believe that in this election this year we will sweep the district. That's my honest belief. So I think this year is going to be we're going to see what happened in Dundalk, Essex area happen in the White Marsh, Parkville, Rosedale area.
Okay, and again, I guess we should get to that point, is to say, well then, why you, though?
Why me? Because I'm just an average, everyday citizen of Baltimore County, and I want to make things better. I'm not here to get rich. Right. I'm definitely not here to get rich. And as a matter of fact, if you look at my website, you'll see that I've made the statement, if I am elected, the entire time I'm in Annapolis, I'll be donating half of my salary to local charities, because I'm not here to get rich. I want to help the community. I want to make the community a better place.
Right.
And every time I do an event, a campaign event, I donate a portion of the donations to a local charity.
Right. Well, in your, career that you had, or careers, that's given you a certain perspective. What do you think they've taught you as far as being a law enforcement officer, being in the military, I guess being in insurance? What tools do you bring from those that will work well in Annapolis?
Well, I think being just in the military and in the police department, I've learned how to be a good leader. And I would not, I would venture to say that if you ask anybody who's ever worked under me, I'm the consummate leader. I will not ask anybody to do what I would not do myself. And that's just the way I've always been. I believe the military is what really instilled the good leadership in me. I want to lead people the right path. I don't want to lead people down the wrong path, which is, I believe, is what is happening in Annapolis these days, is we're being led down the path of destruction for the state. I mean, the governor's doing a great job. Yeah. Don't get me wrong. I love Governor Hogan, and I'm on Team Hogan, but he needs help. He needs people like myself down there to help him get these problems straight.
Well, that's good. Now, what would you say, and we're not going to go general first, but I'll go more specific. What do you see as the important issues or the important concerns for District 8?
Well, for District 8, the most important thing that I see is, and what I hear, is the school issues. Okay. We are having some serious issues in our schools, all over Baltimore County. Discipline issues, there's fights, people are getting raped or assaulted in schools, and nothing's happening to these people who are doing the crimes. We are trying to fix that. I'm working with the parent-to-parent network, and we've been down to D.C. to talk to the U.S. Department of Education to try to roll back some of these discipline things that were put in place in 2014, saying that we need to lower the amount of suspensions and expulsions, and they connect it to federal funds. So I think that's what's caused a lot of our issues in the schools. I think another issue in the schools is just the broken homes. The children, the people, not just broken homes, but the people are working 2 and 3 and 4 jobs, and they're not spending time with their kids like they used to. And the kids are growing up alone, and they don't have any kind of responsibility, and they don't know what responsibility is. They don't know that if you do this, this is going to happen, because they don't get that. And I honestly believe that our children need some sort of discipline, some kind of consequences for their actions. Another big issue in the District 8 is the crime. The crime is on the rise. And the police, they're doing everything they can to try to stop it, but the judicial system is like a revolving door. It's so busy that the people are coming in one door and getting a slap on the wrist and right out the other door. I talked to a city police officer, speaking of the judicial system, who witnessed a guy shoot somebody. He shot him in the leg. He didn't kill him, thank God. But he arrested the guy, took him to court, and the judicial system failed. They pled that down to a simple assault. The guy got time served and sent out on the street that day. This is the kind of stuff that's happening, and this is why the crime is just so rampant, because there's no kind of consequences for anybody's actions. Right. And the third issue really is, the high taxes, the taxes and the fees. And the governor's trying, but he's blocked in every way he possibly can be blocked every year by the legislature. And, hopefully if we can get down there and get 5 Senate seats and 7 delegate seats, they won't be able to override any of his vetoes anymore.
Ah, okay. Well, you put a whole array out there. Let me go back with schools. We'll take each one. Okay. Now, being a former police officer, I've heard all kinds of things about what the role of an SRO should be. And I want to know maybe your opinions on that. What do you think should be the purpose, or what kind of function should an SRO serve in a school?
Well, the first and foremost, it should be for security. His main job is to keep those kids safe and to be the first point of contact for those kids if there's something going on. They should be able to trust the SRO to go up to him and say, hey, this person is doing this, and he should be able to handle anything in the school. Speaking to some of the SROs, I'm finding out that their hands are tied by the administration. They can't make an arrest in the school without asking the administration. They write these reports, but they don't ever come out of the Baltimore County public school system. So we don't ever find out what's really going on in the schools until we hear from the students and the parents. And that's what we're hearing. You know, these teachers are being bullied, and the SROs are being told they can't really do anything about it.
So you're saying that basically that doesn't even get to the media. Some of the stuff that goes on, that the school system keeps an officer of the law from doing his or her job.
That's what we're finding out, yes, in many instances. There's many instances where I've talked to people personally where they have gone to the police and the police have told them there's nothing they can really do. They have to just file their reports with the school.
Okay, and is there any rationale? Has there been any thoughts about why would the school system want to keep that under wraps?
I believe, as I stated earlier, it's all connected to federal funds. With the DCL letter that came down, the Dear Colleague letter that came down from Washington in 2014, and they connected suspensions and expulsions to federal funds, and the numbers needed to be lowered.
Oh, so rather than expel or suspend the students,
they're doing in-school suspensions, so they don't count against their suspensions. So it's not really, instead of sitting in the classroom, they're sitting in the office or sitting in the cafeteria and doing their work. And then we have, you know, the situation where a personal friend of mine's daughter in Harford County schools was stabbed with a pencil by another child in elementary school. Now we're talking
little kids,
6, 7, 8 years old.
Wow.
And the kid had already stabbed 6 other people, and nobody did anything about it. And finally, you know, nobody called the parent. The kid came home and told the parent what had happened, and then the parent called the school to find out what happened, and then they found out what happened. You know, and again, they were told that they could, when this gentleman complained and said, I want this kid removed from my daughter's class because he's a danger to the other kids, they said, well, we can move your daughter. So now we have this kid being victimized by a bully and then being victimized by the system.
Right.
Because now this person needs to move to another school or another class and make new friends and start all over again. So it's double victimization.
Right.
And it's just being swept under the rug.
Well, for that example, and there probably are others, what struck me is this kid who's doing these stabbings with pencils, this officer who can't do anything now may have to do something with that person when they get older on the street.
Correct.
If it's not stopped now in the classroom.
Well, their rationale behind this was they wanted to stop the pipeline from high school to prison, which they have not stopped it. They have pretty much increased it because now you have kids that are graduating from high school and they know no kind of consequences or no kind of discipline, so they come out here on the street and they're doing the same things they're doing in the schools, and we see it as the crime rate rises. And it's just, you're increasing the pipeline from high school to prison because that's exactly where they're headed. If you don't have consequences for what your actions are, then good or bad, then how are you going to learn? You can't learn from no consequences. The only thing you learn is, oh, I got away with it. I can do anything I want.
Yeah, well, one of the candidate forums I was a moderator for, some people thought they were advocating to have SROs not in uniform, that they should be seen as a resource officer and somebody the kids can go to for resources, et cetera, not somebody who's basically an armed guard.
Well, you know, I mean, in Baltimore County, I know there's not a whole lot of elementary schools that have an SRO, and I believe they should. They really should. The Perry Hall High School, for example, has 2 SROs, but there's almost 2,200 students.
Yeah, okay.
So I don't know how they expect 2 SROs to handle a situation with 2,200 students, but it is what it is. I guess, you know, the budget is the budget. We do have some in a lot of the middle schools, but I'm pretty sure we don't have any in any of the elementary schools. And I think if we get some SROs in the elementary schools and teach these kids that these guys are are their friend. They're there to help them. Then by the time they get to high school, it won't be such an adversary kind of relationship.
Well, they used to have that sort of a program. I know when my daughter was in elementary school, I forget exactly what it was called, but I'm not going to say
DARE program, I think.
Yes, the DARE program, yes. Yeah. I was going to say officer friendly, but
right, it was the DARE program.
And they stopped that, didn't they?
I'm not sure. You know, you don't hear a whole lot about it because of the fact of having SROs in these schools.
Right.
But I'll have to look that up.
Yeah, because I was going to say that, I know when she was a kid, that was a thing. The policeman came in, he or she was your friend, and people you could go to, that kind of thing.
Well, in today's media, unfortunately, the police are depicted as not your friend.
That's true.
And as a former police officer myself, I can tell you, walking through shopping centers, you would hear some parents that would say, if you don't stop, I'm going to have him arrest you.
Right.
That's not the right thing to do. Because if this kid is lost, he's not going to run up to me in a uniform and say, help me, because now you're telling him that this guy's going to arrest you.
Exactly.
You really shouldn't be doing that. I mean,
no.
But that's...
No. Some parents, it's their parents, that parent's concept of what a policeman is.
And that's what the media is portraying the police as. Everybody's bad. All the cops are out to get you.
Right. Which is bad, because I know, speaking from my own experience, and also what you used to see in movies and stuff, about the cop would walk the beat, and the guy with the vegetable or fruit stand would give him an apple and those kind of things. And the kids would know him and that kind of thing, and talk to him, and he'd say, how you doing in school today? And I know because my grandfather was a Baltimore City policeman, and he was a beat policeman for most of that. And my uncle was a Baltimore City policeman. And these were, of course, different eras, not today. I mean,
well, I think, if we would stop portraying the police as bad all the time, the only time the police get any press is when it's bad press.
Right.
And I'm not going to sit here and say that all cops are 100% good, because that would be a lie.
Right.
Okay, I know that. Mm-hmm. But, we're not going to say that all lawyers are bad, because there's some that are crooked.
Or politicians.
Or politicians. There's got to be a dividing line. And I think the police officers who do wrong should be punished.
Right. But I think I heard that theme that you brought up. There are people also saying that there should be an SRO in every elementary school in Baltimore County.
I believe that wholeheartedly.
You do advocate that too. Now, what about President Trump's idea of arming teachers with pistols?
Well, I've talked to a lot of people about that issue.
Okay.
I don't agree with it.
Okay.
For many reasons, but for the most of the reason is police officers, veterans, are trained in high stress situations.
Right.
Okay. When it's a whole lot different when you're training somebody to just carry and shoot than to train somebody to carry and shoot while somebody's shooting back at you. Mm-hmm. And I believe that not all, I'm not saying all, but there will be some teachers who may freeze in that situation. And then we have the person who's in the school, he now has another weapon. Because if they freeze, then he can take it, or he or she can take that weapon from them.
Exactly.
My opinion would be, my idea is to bring former police or veterans into these schools to help the SROs be their eyes and ears, not even have them armed, but just have them be in the school so you have somebody that's trained who can handle a stress situation and help evacuate the people or be the eyes and ears for the police officers who are responding. I mean, I think that would be a much better idea.
Well, with your concern, big concern I know you have, is with the schools, do you have any other strategies or ideas to make the school system better that you haven't talked about yet?
Transparency.
Okay.
We need to definitely, the people want to see what's going on. And I'll be honest with you, talking to some of our legislators down in Annapolis, getting information from the school board is worse than getting information from the CIA. They do not give up information for anybody. We have delegates that were trying to get information from the school board this year so they could make wise choices on these bills. And speaking of the superintendent situation, they wouldn't give them the information that they needed, the numbers as far as the suspensions and all that. They just wouldn't give it. I mean, they just completely ignored the public information request.
Right.
And it's like, it's ridiculous. The budget needs to be increased. We need better schools. The fact that we're teaching these kids how to take a test instead of how to live. You're not teaching them math to teach them math. You're teaching them math to learn how to take a test. Right. And when they come out of school, that's not how the business world works. If you don't know how to do something, you're going to fail. And that's the problem with what's going on in the school. We're teaching them how to take a test.
Right.
Not teaching them. You don't see anybody learning civics.
Right.
You don't see anybody learning
school.
Right. You don't see anybody learning home economics anymore. You know,
Yeah, right.
It's all about. Nobody teaches them how to do their taxes. Like when I was in high school, they taught us how to do our taxes, and they even gave us situations where they gave us a certain amount of monopoly money and they taught us how to invest in the stock market. You know, and we did practical exercises about how to invest money, and that's the kind of stuff that they don't teach anymore.
Right, exactly.
They teach how to take a test. You're like,
right.
That's it. That's
right.
what their whole thing is.
Now, what was your number 2 issue? The next big issue that you mentioned?
Oh, the crime.
Oh, tell me about crime, because we have about 10 minutes left.
Okay, all right.
So I want to get into that and then do a few closing things.
All right. Well, the crime rate in the district, in Baltimore County as a whole, has been going up over the last 10, 15 years.
Wow.
A lot of gang activity, a lot of out-of-control children for the same reasons that we spoke of earlier. They're just, the parents aren't able to be home to control the children, so they're just wandering the streets and causing trouble, and there's no discipline. So the crime issues in our district have to be addressed. We need more police officers, and we need more visible presence in the community. I'm not advocating out walking on foot, because most of the neighborhoods in Baltimore County would be a long walk. But we need more of a budget for police, and they need better equipment to work with. The outdated equipment that they get, that it's not going to work.
I mean, bringing that up, for example, because of all the even adverse attention Baltimore City's got, they are getting funding for things like updating their equipment. Do you think that's by taking the needs from Baltimore County are not in the spotlight, that's hurting Baltimore County for making those kind of requests, or nobody's requesting these updates?
Well, I think it has a lot to do with who is making the requests.
Okay.
And I don't believe.
Wouldn't that be the commissioner, or
that would be your county executive.
Oh, the county executive, right?
So
who's leaving?
Who's leaving? So I don't believe he has run our county properly. He is not doing a great job for the east side of the county. I know that. I know he's done a lot over here on the west side, except for Lansdowne.
Right, we don't get in. Believe me. But Catonsville, yes, us no.
Right, but the new school that's needed badly here in Lansdowne should be top priority, but it's not. But the crime issues, like, we need to start holding the judges responsible. I'll just throw it out there.
Yeah.
We need to start holding the judges responsible for allowing these people to just walk in the courtroom, pay a fine, and walk out. There needs to be some kind of consequence for your action.
One of the things we've had on our streams and touched upon, we can touch upon it briefly here again, is the fact, again, the current county executives bringing in these housing developments which benefit city people, low-income city people, to move into Baltimore County. And in fact, we have graphics and things that we've showed on some of our streams talk about the amount of people who are moving out of the city, and a good percentage of them are coming to Baltimore County, but they're not bringing tax dollars with them because they're so low income. They're not paying a lot of taxes, if any, which brings the standard of living down for everybody in Baltimore County, but also then brings in, if not, in reality, but because they don't have any money to begin with, it raises crime. They got to make their dollars somehow. And unfortunately, sometimes it's illegally.
Unfortunately, it
Yes.
is. So I'm not saying that all Section 8 is bad.
Right.
I'm saying that
either.
When people need help, we should help them. It should not be a way of life. There's got to be a time limit on these things. You can't stay on Section 8 and welfare and everything for 20 and 30 years. I believe in education. We should educate our people better, and then maybe we could lower the amount of welfare in Section 8,
right.
and we wouldn't have to worry so much about it inundating the county from the city, because the city is downsizing their Section 8 program, and then the county is attempting, with Kevin Kamenetz, to bring it into the county.
Right. Now, I know it may be a little early, but do you have any endorsements as yet?
Actually, I have a couple.
Okay.
I'll mention one.
Okay.
Liz Mattori has endorsed me.
She's a friend of ours. We've had her in here as an interview.
Liz is a very good person, and I've personally endorsed her as well.
Oh, very good.
So I'll be coming out with a list of endorsements in the next few weeks.
Okay, we'll wait and stay tuned, and we'll get them back here, maybe even get you back here. And also, you'll have some upcoming events. I saw something about a breakfast with you on the 28th. Are there anything?
Yes, sir.
Right?
Actually, we are having a breakfast at the Silver Spring Mining Company on Bel Air Road.
There it is, yeah.
And we will be discussing the school issues.
There we go.
I'll have two folks from Parent to Parent Network speaking, and I'll have two people from the current Board of Education, because as we know, the Board of Education will be changing this year.
Yes, that's true.
Because it's going to be an elected board,
right?
Or a majority elected board.
Not so much all appointed by the county executive anymore. Okay, good. And then, well, close to finally here, want you to look into that camera over there and just tell people briefly, again, remind them why you're the choice in District 8.
Okay. All right. I am the choice for District 8 because I am a conservative choice, and I believe in your liberty, and I want everybody to be safe and have a healthy place and a great place to live, the way Baltimore County used to be. I believe the schools should be the best schools in the world, not just the country, not just the state. I think they should be the best schools in the world in Baltimore County. And they should be the safest. Our kids should not have anxiety about going to school in the morning. And I will do everything I can to make that happen. I am a small business owner. I know the problems that we have running a small business in this state. And I will work with the governor to make it easier on the small business, because our economy relies on small businesses. And as a former police officer, I am a law and order kind of guy, and I'm a no nonsense. I don't care what letter's behind your name. If you do something wrong, I believe you need to be punished, and there should be discipline for even adults. So that's why I believe I'm your choice in District 8.
And remind people about your contact information, where they can find you.
All right, you can find me on Facebook at Kevin Leary for Maryland, and you can also find me at my website at www.kevinleary.org. And you can call me. I have a personal cell phone. It's 443-356-1164. If you have any questions, please call me. I'll be glad to talk to you.
There you go, folks. That's definitely transparency in politics right there. Thank you, Kevin, for stopping by tonight. And
thanks for having me.
It was great to have you, and we're going to have you back. I mean, be a friend of the station.
I will.
And, folks, that's the end of another one of our TV Free Baltimore, Maryland Politics shows. Please stay tuned for future editions where we give you a chance to look at people who are running for office that don't usually get a chance to be heard in conventional media. And so once again, I am Paul Stefan, and good night.
You're watching Maryland Politics here on TV Free Baltimore.
We also gave those who wished to destroy space to do that as well. We also gave those who wished to destroy space to do that as well. We also gave those who wished to destroy space to do that as well. We also gave those who wished to destroy space to do that as well. We also gave those who wished to destroy space to do that as well.
You're watching Maryland Politics here on TV Free Baltimore.
Hello, this is Paul Stefan, and again, welcome to another edition of Maryland Politics here at TV Free Baltimore. And today, our guest is Joe Howe, who is running for the state Senate seat here in District 12. Welcome, Joe.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
We're glad to have you here. A local boy here.
Well, that's right. I live right down the street.
You couldn't get any closer to the station.
Pretty much been here my entire life.
That's good. Now, tell us then, start there. Tell us a little about your background, your family's background.
Well, you know, I'm a lifetime area resident, a husband and father, past member of the Lansdowne Volunteer Fire Department. Pretty much born and raised here, you know, in my dad's business. I'm a Johns Hopkins University graduate, and I've run for office before.
Right.
Yeah, I've been a first place Republican nominee for the House of Delegates several times. And yeah, so I've been around for a long time, been very active in the community.
Well, that's fantastic. You know, that's what we want to see, a little bit, get us represented here. I mean, I should bring that up a little bit too. How this district, and especially the Lansdowne, the southwestern Baltimore area, because I'm not going to leave out Arbutus, I'm not going to leave out Baltimore Highlands, we don't get what other places in the county get. And so I think maybe somebody like you can change that because you know the needs we have.
Well, I mean, I think there's no question about it. Southwest Baltimore County has been suffering, and it's been deteriorating over the last 20 years. And it's really sad to see because as a lifetime area resident, a person who's grown up in this area, in a small business where you interact with people every day, it's a shame to see a couple of things. One, to see the loss of small business and to see the mass exodus of the good people that have always lived here and kept this area propped up. You know, we still have a lot of folks who work for Baltimore County in the fire department, for example, or in the police department, but they've decided to leave and live in other places, like Anne Arundel County, or further north in Baltimore County, as opposed to staying here and keeping our community tight and strong. And I can't completely fault them for that because there hasn't been any investment, particularly in Lansdowne, for a long time. I mean, our schools, although we're getting some renovations and a new elementary school, our high school is still in a state of disrepair.
Right, exactly.
It's needed desperately. Our shopping centers are in trouble. Small businesses are leaving and struggling, and there don't seem to be any incentives for rebuilding or revitalizing.
That's true. I mean, I'll get into that in a minute with you because I wanted to get into local issues. But what, with your background, working with your father and going to the college and having your own businesses, what did you decide to get into politics, and why did you decide to get into politics?
For all the reasons I just mentioned.
Okay.
I mean, look, I raised a family here. You know, 2 kids all the way through college, and they attended local colleges as well as all the local schools. And I've seen the problems and the need. And I've been involved with repairing a lot of the problems. For example, right here along the Hammons Ferry Road corridor in 2002, I think the first big job I had for the community was to get the sagging utility poles removed along the Hammons Ferry Road corridor. At the time, Shorty Miller was our community association president, and each meeting, the residents were concerned about the danger. They were concerned about these poles that threatened the safety of our motorists as they would drive up and down Hammons Ferry Road. And for years, John Kraushofer, God rest his soul, wonderful man, and Shorty Miller were trying to get these poles removed, and they couldn't do it. So I didn't understand why it should have been so difficult. They appointed me chairman of the sagging utility pole committee, and I went to work on it, and within 30 days we had those poles removed, and it made news.
Great.
So, you know, that really energized me, and to be able to work hard and find a solution to a problem when elected officials and other people just didn't want to put in the hard work to get it done.
Right.
But I was willing to do it, and I was able to get it done.
Well, that's great. So, because I mean, that's part of where we are. Now, the other thing to look at is, as you mentioned, you have run for office before. What, 3-4 times, something like that?
Yeah, that's right. I've been first place Republican nominee for 4 times.
Okay. And some people would say, well, why are you still out there running if every time you go out you lose?
Because I'm passionate about it. It's not my fault that I'm losing. I'm running in a district that's been changed at least 2 times to keep people like me out of office. I think that's a shame. I mean, gerrymandering, it's really it's borderline criminal. And it's so frustrating, not just for me, but for a lot of people, that any party would design a map to keep good people out and to keep communities who need help down. That's the way I look at it. I just refuse to give up. I'm passionate about serving the people in District 12, and I'm not going to give up on them. And you know, when you look at the numbers, we've always been so close. So it's a worthy cause.
Right.
I can't give up on something that I believe in.
Because I know that in the last election when you ran for House of Representatives, you were the top vote getter amongst Republicans and finished 4th overall,
Right.
we might as well say, and it's only 3 seats. But you were only 1,200 or 1,300 votes off.
That's right.
That was fairly close. I don't know what that is in percentages, but you were close.
Just a few percentage points. And keep in mind, that's in a district where no Republican had ever run before, because it was a new gerrymandered district designed to keep Republicans way out. And in my opinion, the reason that district was changed the way that it has been is because in 2010, we got within maybe 150 votes of taking the House of Delegates seat. And then the very next election, Columbia had been added in.
Right.
And nothing against the good folks in Columbia, but the fact of the matter is they were added to the district to stack the deck against us. And hey, look, they need help just like everybody else.
Right.
But
of course,
you know, that's the underbelly of politics. You know, it's not just Democrats who do it. In some other states, it might be Republicans. But whoever it is, it's wrong. Gerrymandering is wrong.
Right.
And it is absolutely wrong to keep good people out of office who have the passion and the ability and the ideas that we need to improve our communities.
Well, good. And this year, there is an open seat in the House of Delegates. So why this time, I don't know if it was your decision or maybe you can tell me, why State Senate when you say, oh, well, there's an open seat, maybe I'd slide into that seat in the House of Delegates and we get a Republican in the House. Where did it come from, the decision for you to run for State Senate?
That's a great question, and the simple answer is because that State Senate, I certainly didn't expect to see an open Senate seat. Senator Casemeyer, who I believe is a gentleman, has been in office for a long time, probably about 30 years.
Right.
I don't line up with him politically all the time, but I think he's worked hard for our state, and I appreciate what he has attempted to do, with the exception of this District 12 map. But yeah, the reason I chose the Senate seat is simply because what I've always been about is achieving or going after a position where I can do the greatest amount of good for the greatest number of people.
Okay.
And I think that the State Senate is that spot. Again, I didn't expect this seat to open up.
Right.
But when it did, it seemed like a natural extension of the work that I've been doing in the community and in politics. And it also positions District 12 uniquely. I believe we're going to get Larry Hogan, our Republican governor, reelected.
Okay.
He's a great guy. And I believe that we're going to get Alan Kittleman in Howard County reelected. And in addition, Al Redmer in Baltimore County. With this Republican lineup and a Republican state senator from Lansdowne, we can get the funds we need to make the improvements that we need. Nothing can stop us from doing that, because the one thing I can tell you is that I work extremely well with all of those gentlemen that I've just mentioned.
Okay.
They're good guys, they're committed, and I'm excited about it. It's a tremendous opportunity.
Can you also work with people across the aisle?
I can. You know, I've always been, and I think everyone knows, I'm a bipartisan guy. I'm not your stereotypical politician. I have a good relationship with Councilman Quirk. He's a person that'll take my phone call. And even though there have been difficulties in this area, I don't point at him or blame him completely for the lack of improvements, because I've seen times when people in his office and himself have worked very hard. What I think is that it's teamwork. If you don't have a good team, you can't get great things accomplished.
Right.
What I can tell you is that I can work across the aisle. I do have relationships with a lot of people. And I'm about the closest thing you're going to get to an incumbent senator, because I've been in this a long time.
Okay. That's good to know. Now, in the general election, because you are running unopposed, voters need to know you're running unopposed, that November comes, it's going to be either Clarence Lamb or Mary Kay Siggety, I think, and one of those two. Which one of those two would you rather run against?
Well, I think I'm going to win, and I don't think it matters which one.
So it doesn't matter.
It really doesn't matter which one, because I think that I have a unique set of skills and unique ideas which are going to differentiate me in the district. And they are the things that are going to get me elected. For example, there are a lot of problems in Maryland. There are a lot of problems in District 12. And they all come down to the same thing: money.
Right.
All comes down to resources. I'm the only candidate running in the state of Maryland with a plan to raise $350 million a year without raising taxes. And I want to do it by creating an immigrant pay-to-work program.
Okay, well, talk about it.
Whereby all of the undocumented workers in Maryland would be required to purchase an annual temporary right to work for $1,000. And any employer that wishes to hire them would be required to purchase a blanket hiring certificate. Those permit sales alone will raise $350 million without raising anybody's taxes.
For the state of Maryland.
For the state of Maryland, and that's
And even for
before
this
income
district.
and that's before income tax revenue.
Okay, and for this district too, we'll get some of that.
Yeah, sure. Of course we will, because I have, as a senator, a person that Governor Hogan desperately needs. By the way, he needs 5 additional senators so that we can protect his vetoes. So he's got skin in this game. He's a person that wants to see Lansdowne and Southwest Baltimore County and District 12 as a whole do better. He's told me those things himself. So, yeah, I think we have a tremendous opportunity with creating additional revenue and putting that revenue where it's needed the most.
Right.
We can make quite a difference.
Because that's one of the things I was bringing up to you is about, local issues of District 12. And one of the things, and it's been in the news recently, is throughout the state, they have developed these opportunity zones for small businesses. But I saw that southwestern Baltimore County was not one of these opportunity zones.
Begs the question, right?
Yeah.
Why? I mean, it's poor leadership. It's a lack of leadership. And, some of the names that you've mentioned who I'm potentially running against or will be running against at least one of them, they're already in office. So they're already not doing their part.
Either one of the people you're going to run against are currently in office. Yeah.
I can guarantee you I'm going to do my part.
Okay. Because I think what they were saying, the excuse was that certain areas didn't get opportunity zones. They were only given to places where programs were already in place. It was like these opportunity zones and tax breaks for small businesses was to enhance stuff that's already there, which kind of leaves this area begging again.
You know, what I really think it is, I think if we're talking about Southwest Baltimore County, and really if we're talking about District 12, it's considered to be a Democratic stronghold. And the people in this district are taken for granted. They're added right into the guaranteed vote column. Those votes shouldn't be guaranteed.
Right.
Because people are being let down, people are suffering in District 12, and particularly Southwest Baltimore County, and we need to change that.
Now, I would say that because I talked to you off camera. It seems like, I guess part of your district, does it go down Washington Boulevard into Elk Ridge?
It does, goes down, that's exactly right. It goes down Washington Boulevard to about Montgomery Road and then out through Ellicott City and into Columbia.
Because I was going to say, you look at things like Route 1 or as Washington Boulevard, they have Diageo now, the people who have the Guinness Brewery. And I said, I saw you at openings for a new Elk Ridge firehouse.
$16 million.
And Lansdowne has been wanting and needing a new firehouse for, I don't know, 20, 30, 50 years.
Yeah.
And
over 30 years.
Yeah, a long time. And also,
I mean, 40 years ago, I was 10 years old spinning a carnival wheel to raise money for the Lansdowne Volunteer Fire Department's new firehouse.
Right.
It still hasn't happened.
Right.
That was 40 years ago.
There you go. And then a new library for Elk Ridge, which I've seen.
At least another $16 million. We're talking over $30 million worth of improvements.
And that's all happened down there. And that's your district.
That's right.
But it hasn't happened here. And part of that might be if it's at the state level, again, we'll bring in people I know right now in the House of Delegates, not Senator Casemeyer, but 2 of the 3 current seats who are the ones are running again, well, not 2 of them, one is running for state senate, Lamb, and Dr. Hill are both from Howard County. And Ebersol's from Baltimore County, I think Halethorpe. But so again, it seems like Howard County got the goodies because that's where these people live. And, of course, Mary Kay Siggety is also in Howard County. She's on the Howard County Council, chair of the council this year. And of course, Clarence Lamb lives in Howard County as well. So, again, if you want to say if you want a local choice who knows the needs of this district, it's Joe Howe.
That's absolutely true. I mean, look, the reason things are happening in Howard County is because you have a strong Republican county executive who gets along very well with the governor of Maryland, and he has a strong Republican delegation in Howard County. And they're able to bring the funds back to the county that he needs to make the needed improvements.
Right.
What's going wrong for the Southwest Baltimore County portion of the district is, you're right, 3 of the 4 members that represent us in the General Assembly live in Columbia. And obviously, they don't have very much concern for this side of the district. Right. And I mean, some people may think that's unfair to say that, but the fact of the matter is, Southwest Baltimore County is in decline. And so something is not happening correctly. Something's going wrong. And I think they're a big part of what's been going wrong.
Right.
So as a state senator, we can change that. Again, I have a good working relationship with hopefully Al Redmer. I truly hope he's our new Baltimore County executive. Good man, very capable, team player. He cares about the community. Alan Kittleman and Governor Hogan. Just to get started, and then from there, if we can pick up a couple more seats in the House,
right,
all the better.
And in the Senate.
Well, of course,
you want to be veto-proof, you know.
Yeah, we need those 4 other things, but we need 4 other senators. But we have those real opportunities. They've been identified. I mean, you've got a strong race over with Christian Mealy. He's doing well. I fully expect him to be able to pick up that seat. So, yeah, it's promising. It's actually very exciting.
Well, very good. Now, you talked a bit more about the economy. I don't know if anything else you want to bring up to that as far as like jobs or job creation or anything like that. I think maybe weave that into your feelings about education. Go ahead, talk about ideas about how to improve education in Baltimore County and what could happen.
Well, look. First of all, right off the bat, we need to pass legislation to get immigration under control and to get this immigrant pay-to-work program established so that we can raise the millions of dollars that we need to build schools, to expand VOTEC programs, and to get us back on track. That is an absolute must. Yeah, I think that we have real opportunity. I think people are suffering here in Southwest Baltimore County. We need to identify and create incentives for small businesses. We need to make sure that people stay in our communities. We need to invest so that our policemen and our firemen stay here in this county because it's that promising. We don't want people moving out. So we have to invest in these things.
Now, what about crime? Because one of the things we've mentioned on our live streams, you should look at some of our shows, is how people from Baltimore City have moved into Baltimore County, but the people who've moved in have lower income or they're not working at all, so it's not improving the tax base at all. And also, subsequently, some of the Baltimore City, crime is coming into our part, and I guess all over Baltimore County, because the current county executive is trying to really push subsidized housing and to bring those people into the county.
Well, you know, I've known that this has been coming. The first signs were as far back as 2000 and 2002. Believe it or not, I was talking about this very problem 16 or 17 years ago at the local community meetings. And the reason that I knew there would be this issue arising was because of the tremendous growth that's taking place in South Baltimore with Under Armour and now the building of Port Covington. I mean, we're talking about tremendous investments in old South Baltimore. As a result of the improvements down there, the poor people are being squeezed. And you know what? They need help too, and they need somewhere to live, and they need somewhere to go, and we need to help with that. But we weren't prepared for them to rush into Southwest Baltimore County. And our county executive apparently wasn't prepared to help them resettle or rebuild and become better citizens who could own businesses and help the economy and create jobs. It's really, really a shame, and it's a missed opportunity. So what do we do? Well, there's a lot of things we need to do.
What can we do?
I think that, first of all, when you talk about crime, you need to talk about training your police, properly staffing your police, supporting your police and your firemen. You need to make sure that you're supporting your teachers, paying them adequately, investing in your schools. And you need to create incentives for small business ownership. So these are just some of the few things that we must do if we're going to turn this thing around.
Right. Now, what about another thing? A lot of the issues for candidates that I've interviewed, and we've had a lot of folks in here, is about the opioid epidemic. What do you have to say about the increase in the use of opioids and the problems that come with that?
Well, obviously, drug addiction is a terrible thing. Drug dealing is an even worse thing. I think we need more treatment for drug addicts and drug users, and we need stiffer penalties for drug dealers. I think drug dealers are the problem. And so it's a two-part approach to dealing with that. A third thing is, though, we need to set a good example.
Right.
You know, I don't have a particular problem against anyone who uses marijuana, for example, but I don't agree with it. And I don't think that although we shouldn't tell adults what they should and should not put into their body, I think that we need to make sure we have a good example. We need to protect our kids. We need to shelter them from this type of mentality and behavior. We need to support our police so that they can enforce our laws. You know, a big problem right now is that we have a lot of good laws on the books, but it doesn't seem like anyone's enforcing those. And the police these days aren't enforcing those because they're afraid of what's going to happen to them. I mean, think about it. you've got 20 years on the job, and one bad arrest, one, even if it's a good arrest that's scrutinized, that's turned into something that it wasn't, you could lose your pension, you could lose your freedom. There's a fine line that we're walking here between what's best for the public and what's best for the law, but we are a society of laws. We have to obey laws, and we have to support our police when they enforce the laws. They need to treat us properly. They need to treat us fair and equitably. They need to know their jobs, and they need to be trained properly on those jobs, and we need to do a better job of recruiting. But, right is right and wrong is wrong. We need to enforce the laws. We need to get tough on drug dealers. We need to get tough on criminals. And we need to have compassion for users. And we need to have a way that when we get them off of drugs, we have a way to develop them, give them skills, retrain them, and reintroduce them to the workforce.
Well, good. I mean, other people say when you talk about laws, a lot of people think the judges have been too lenient, giving people very weak sentences or putting them on probation, and even people who already have established records. Maybe there are some of those cases.
Yeah. But, all in all, I think if you would ask the average person on the street how difficult it is to have someone arrested these days, I mean, it has to be a very, very serious offense for someone to even go into a court. Whose fault is it? I guess it's all of ours. For allowing it to get to this place, for allowing our leaders to not perform, to not recognize, to serve, to get paid, but not to do the work.
Oh boy!
And so that's what I really think the problem is. But it's not complete. There's a lot of good public servants out there,
right?
Elected and appointed, sworn and civilian. We need to expand that group of people. And we need to hold non-performers accountable. And the voters need to hold non-performers accountable. And they need to elect people like me to the state senate who will work hard for them, who will come up with ideas that we need to improve our way of life, generate revenue without raising taxes, and get the job done.
Well, good. You sort of almost gave the summary there, which is what I want you to do, is to go over here, because that's your camera, look over there, and tell people in a few short words why they should vote for you.
Because I have the passion and commitment. I have what it takes to fix our most pressing problems. I have a plan to raise $350 million per year by creating an immigrant pay-to-work program whereby all undocumented workers in Maryland would be required to purchase an annual temporary right to work for $1,000. Again, this will raise $350 million a year without raising taxes. Money that we can use to fix our failing infrastructure. Money we can use to improve our way of life. Money we can use to build new schools and keep our kids safe. And I hope that the voters of District 12 will give me a chance to serve them in the Senate because I care and I'm ready to do the work. And that's more than I can say about a lot of people. So please vote for Joe Howe, and remember, you'll always know with Joe Howe. If you'd like more information about my campaign, just log on to joehowe.org or check me out on Facebook.
There we go. You got a hold of me there. I was going to say, give me your contact information, and you beat me to it. But anyway, great, and thanks for stopping by, Joe. And don't be a stranger. There's a lot of time between here and November. We may even have you and whoever the Democratic opponent is in here for a debate.
That'd be great.
Or at least
Thank you very much.
Or an issues. We won't call it a debate. We'll just say it's an issues and your counterpoints about that certain issue.
Well, I'll be happy to come back anytime.
Okay,
Thanks
terrific.
for having me.
Thank you. And ladies and gentlemen, again, that's another of our shows to get you ready for voting on June 26th and also in November here at TV Free Baltimore. We hope you'll stop in again for another one of our shows entitled Maryland Politics. So until next time, I'm Paul Stefan, and have a great day.
You're watching Maryland Politics here on TV Free Baltimore.
If you want change, if you want these streets cleaned up, if you want this heroin really attacked and taken care of, if you want this Section 8 housing abolished or reduced, if you want jobs coming to this county, if you want to see a better education system that's accountable to students and to the parents, if you want to see real change, and if you want to see this county to become the best county in the United States of America, then I'm your guy.
Good morning. I see you've already met my colleague, Mike Lee. He's a good guy, and we do a lot of things together and work on a lot of projects together. You might be scratching your head and asking yourself, what is a libertarian doing talking to a bunch of evangelical students? Aren't libertarians crazy? Aren't they kind of scary? And I think it's a misconception sometimes because when you hear the word libertarian, you think, well, gosh, libertarians, they want anything goes, right? No rules, no laws, you can do whatever you want. And it's not exactly what we advocate. Libertarians do advocate freedom, liberty. We advocate government ought to leave you alone and that you ought to get to make choices on your own. But would that mean lawlessness? Would that mean no rules, anything goes? Well, even libertarians believe in some sort of rules. And so one of the rules that libertarians believe in is something called the non-aggression principle. And this is a principle really that when you hear it, you'll say, well, gosh, most government is founded upon this. The non-aggression principle means that under a libertarian society, if we had one, you pretty much could do whatever you wanted as long as you didn't hurt somebody else. So as long as you didn't invade their sphere of their rights, you could kind of do what you wanted. And you say, well, gosh, then there still would be all kinds of crazy things. Everybody would be doing heroin, there'd be prostitution, there'd be all these things. And really, many of us who are Christian and libertarian believe that not only would you be restrained by government from doing things that would harm somebody else, but that a libertarian society or even a republic, as we were intended to be, would have some kind of restraint. And some people have described it as virtue. Washington described the beginning of the republic, and he said it would be necessary for our country to succeed to have virtue. So you'd have the idea that the government would restrain you from harming other individuals, but there has to be something that also guides us, that keeps us on the straight and narrow, allows us to cooperate as a civilized society, allows us to be an advanced society. Think of it this way. There are laws against stealing, and there should be, but how many in here would steal if there were not a law against stealing? Oh, good. I'm glad we don't have any thieves here today. But the thing is most of us don't steal. Most of us don't rape, murder, do all these horrific things, not because there's a law against it, but because we have a sense of right and wrong. We have a moral compass. We have something grounded in religion. We have this sense of virtue. And you think, well, how many people have this? And that's sort of the question of where a society goes over a long period of time. Some would argue that we had more virtue 20 years ago, 40 years ago, 50 years ago. That may or may not be true, but there's at least some argument to that. Some who look at Europe say that they've abandoned religion and they've become much more secular, and they've sort of lost their sense of right and wrongs in some ways. So really you have to have both. You have to have a government that restrains you from harming someone, but you also want to have a people that is a virtuous people. There's a theologian by the name of Os Guinness, and he puts it this way. He says that liberty requires restraint, but the only restraint consistent with liberty is self-restraint. And so the reason why that's important is we often see, particularly from Christians, they come to Washington and they say, we've got all these terrible, immoral things happening, government has to fix them. When in reality, it may be that there are some things that do need fixing that perhaps we can't fix. And I'll give you an example. The number one correlation, causation, whatever you want to have it, with poverty in our country. If we say we want to wipe out poverty, what's the number one thing that is linked to poverty in our country? It's having children before you're married. Now, I'm not here to moralize or tell you, what's right or wrong. I'm just here to tell you that is the number one link. If you look at charts, there's a book by Charles Murray called Coming Apart at the Seams, and he does 2 categories of charts on everything, all the socioeconomic, all the income, everything about your life, and there are 2 tracks. One, people who don't finish high school and have children before they're married, and they're here along the bottom of the x-axis. And then you see at the very top of our society, the top elite, and these aren't all true, but they're mostly true, it's generalizations, people who finish college and wait to have kids. But then you say, well, what's government going to do about this? I can't make you wait. So really, sometimes when I agree with a group of ministers, they say, what are you going to do to make us a better, more moral nation? I say, well, what are you going to do? And really, there has to be some of that. And I think there has to be this realization the government can't do everything for you. You have to be part of it. And it doesn't mean it's not important. It doesn't mean that virtue is not important. It doesn't mean that we don't want virtuous people in government. But it means that government's not going to make us a virtuous society. And I think that's very important when we think about what we want from government and where we're going. A second way of looking at this would be on the idea of rights. So the right to be left alone, the right to practice your religion, the right to have property, the right to have speech, all of these rights that are sort of in the Bill of Rights. Did the government grant you these rights, or did they pre-exist government and the government guarantees these rights? And it's very important when we look at rights because many of us who see the Founding Fathers and talk about the idea of natural rights or God-given rights, we think they're innately yours. The right to speak, to practice your religion, to keep the fruits of your earning. These are yours. They're just inherently yours. Now you say, well, we have to give up something to be in a society, right? Well, there are certain things, like for example, your property. As you go out and you earn your check and you get your check and you've worked 2 weeks, a portion of it's taken by the government. And you say, well, aren't they taking my stuff? Well, they are, and we have this idea, maybe not explicit, but we have this idea of a social compact. So you say, we're going to live in a civilized world and part of my check's going to be taken. And so we kind of implicitly agree to this, but if at the end of 2 weeks you were to make $600 and you got your check and it said minus $600 and your net was zero, how many people would like living in that society? Then 100% of the fruits of your labor would belong to government, would be taken from you. So the question always is, when we look at issues like this, whose money is it? Well, I think it's yours. Are you willing to give up some of it? Yes, but I want to minimize how much I give up it because I want to maximize my freedom and my ability to either give it to my church, help the people in my community, or help my family. And so really it's always a question of maximum or minimum. How much government do you want? You want the least amount of government that we need, because the more government you have, or the more of your paycheck you give up, the less of your freedom you have. And so this is the tug of war, but I think it's an interesting way of looking at it when you try to decide, do you want more government or less government? Do you want government to do X or Y? Is government good at doing things? You ask yourself, if you have $100, if each of you had $100 and you were going to give it to somebody, if you thought, I really want to help people, would you give it to the federal welfare system, or would you give it to the Salvation Army? I wouldn't hesitate for a second. There's no way I would send $1 up here that I didn't have to, because they're just not very good at it. They're so far away from the people that can't do it, but I can see in my community what the Salvation Army does. I can go to the homeless shelter. I can go to Helping Hands in Christ and see how they help people pay their bills. Now you say, well, government does do some good for people. They probably do, but they're horribly inefficient at it. And so you say, well, we need government to take care of people. It's like, these are the people that can't run the post office. All right? They have a monopoly on delivering letters and they lose $1 billion a quarter. They're just not very good at it. So government is best that governs least, so you have the most amount of freedom, but government is also best that governs at a more local level. Doesn't make it perfect, but you can at least see it. Your city councilman or city councilwoman lives down the street. You can talk to her about, or him about, an idea about how you might have better sidewalks or how we might do something for the homeless in our community. But if you send it up here, we will throw lots of money at it and it won't be any better. Department of Education. We didn't have it when I was a kid. We have it now, and our scores are maybe not any better than they were before we had the Department of Education. You say, well, should government be involved in education? Well, there wasn't any provision for it in the Constitution. You say, well, no government? What would happen? What would happen if the Department of Education disappeared tomorrow? What would happen to us? Probably nothing. The thing is most of your taxes that support your schools are from local taxes. In Kentucky, 95% of our taxes are from Kentucky taxes. And we have a Department of Education there, but we duplicate everything. So the Department of Education has had all these teaching standards and testing standards, and then Kentucky does the same thing, and they're spending millions of dollars doing the same thing the Department of Education is doing. We take all these tests, and the teachers are forced to teach to the test, and then in the end, we're not really positive whether anybody's any smarter other than they can take these tests. And there still are those who argue that we're not doing better. One of the things I think we could do in education is allow more freedom.
In March 2016, our county executive, Kevin Kamenetz, announced a settlement of litigation. Baltimore County residents apparently stood accused of serious human rights violations. So serious that Kamenetz committed us to spend $30 million to subsidize developers of affordable housing, and committed us to relocate over 2,000 dependent households to nice suburban neighborhoods with high-performing schools, regardless of the costs. And so, with the stroke of his pen, Towson became the epicenter of the largest public housing relocation experiment in the United States, without so much as a vote by County Council on this deal. And if you even just asked what Baltimore County did wrong, what we were accused of, you would find no answer. No record of the original complaint, no press release from the group suing us, no public record of 4 years of litigation. Over 10,000 pages of case details exempt from the Freedom of Information Act. This was done in secret for a reason, because it was intended to subvert democracy in Baltimore County, to bypass county council, and to impose a far-reaching agenda without any public input. And because the arguments against us would not have withstood public scrutiny, at least not outside of the secret proceedings of this biased HUD court. And because this plan is engineered to ignore the concerns of the communities it targets, regardless of any harm it may cause them. But really at its core, because the more information is made public, the dirtier this deal looks. County residents had no notice, no right to confront our accusers, no say in the settlement terms imposed on us, which now by design can never be modified by our elected representatives, even though most of this deal's costs are scheduled for after Kamenetz leaves office. Let's call this what it was, a betrayal of Baltimore County residents. But Kamenetz was not alone in that betrayal. While these special interests were suing Baltimore County taxpayers, Towson's representative, Delegate Steve Lafferty, was actually on the side of the people suing his constituents. Lafferty is the author and lead sponsor of their top legislative priority, giving them unchecked quasi-governmental power to move thousands of people around Baltimore County like dots on a map. Lafferty's bill would change state law to make this sort of abusive litigation even easier in the future. Not even Kamenetz would go that far, handing unaccountable power to a group of hostile special interests who answer to no elected officials. Maybe this is why, when the settlement was announced, these activists confidently stated the 2,000 households and $30 million was merely a first step. We know their agenda includes forcing Towson to build public housing projects, so we'd be wise to take that statement seriously. Defending democracy against a cabal of special interests, seeking unaccountable power over local communities, should not be controversial. It should not be partisan. And at a local level, it wasn't. By a 6-1 bipartisan vote, Baltimore County Council resoundingly rejected Lafferty's plan. So Lafferty responded by partnering with D.C. area Democrats in the state legislature to override the will of his county's locally elected representatives. Towson residents had no say in Kamenetz's dirty deal, but we will have a choice in 2018. Hi, I'm Steve McIntyre, and I'm running for the House of Delegates, because Towson deserves a representative who actually represents the people who call its communities home. Not some partisan agenda or some extreme ideology, and absolutely not some band of special interests who seek to impose their plans on our communities. What happened here is wrong. It really should be a national scandal. But there's a lot more of this story yet to come. This is the first episode in a series, and if you go to my website, stevemcintyre.org, sign up, I'll keep you updated on the latest. And of course, please share this with your friends and neighbors. This is important information. I don't make these statements lightly, but people of Baltimore County deserve to know the truth. Anyway, thanks a lot for paying attention and, considering the facts with an open mind. And I look forward to meeting you on the campaign trail. Thanks a lot, and have a great day.
It's easy hiding my heroin habit from my parents. If I'm tired or don't eat, I'm just acting like a typical kid. I hide my stash in my room because I know my parents would never snoop. They don't notice the missing painkillers either, or the money I take from their wallets, but I think they're going to notice this.
hope you're enjoying your visit here this evening. Now, on with the show.
Hello, this is Paul Stefan, and this is another edition of TV Free Baltimore's Film Reviews. And today, our guest is writer-director Eric Christopher Myers, and we'll mostly be talking about his film, which is soon to be released, called Butterfly Kisses.
Behind me stands Ilchester Tunnel, a throughway for the B&O Railroad for over a century. But for the past 80 years, it has become something far more sinister.
And the very first one that I pick up says, final solution. A young lady identifies herself as Sophia Crane, and then it got a little upsetting after that. Got a little bit weird. There's no cuts. There's no retakes. There's no calling for action. There's absolutely no evidence to suggest that somebody is directing them.
We have the possibility that this whole thing is real. And we have the possibility that this whole thing is a largely plausible hoax.
If you're working with all these elements, you can, journalistically speaking, you can construct your own story out of whatever footage you choose to put in there.
I do not believe that this video is authentic.
I think there's some acting involved, and there's some effects involved. And I think that it's kind of disturbing that he feels that the only way to market this footage is to pretend it's real.
This has been done 1,000 times before, and we think it's a scam. I'm not the only one, it's everyone. We're gonna take this footage to every professional in town that we can find. Ghost hunters, mythbusters. We're going to go to the radio stations. We're going to the TV stations. We're going to show the footage, and we're gonna saturate the market with this information. Then we're gonna prove to the world that Peeping Tom exists. The camera doesn't lie.
So welcome, Eric.
Thank you very much. Pleasure to be here.
Where we always like to start for everybody is to say, what's your background and how did you get to film?
I've been a cinephile since I was very, very young. I loved horror films as a small child, Universal movies and the Hammer films, and later on began to sort of expand my interests outward. Storytelling was something that was always very, very important to me, and so I began writing screenplays and short stories and always dreamed of making films. And around the time I was in high school, I was doing a lot of theater and began working with some other theater students making terrible, terrible, terrible films, gangster movies and whatnot, and then I just never stopped.
Mm-hmm. And you went to film school, didn't you?
I went to Towson University, yes.
And you took their film program?
I did.
Okay. Because some people we've had in here had no film school experience. They just, just came from other disciplines, learned by doing, which you did too a lot of.
There's a lot to be said for that. There's what you learn in the classroom, and then there's what you learn in the field. Right. And when I made my first feature film, Roulette, which was, financed on credit cards and was, a complete and total volunteer-based project with people who had day jobs and lives outside of this, shooting overnights, weekends, that's the ultimate film school. When you're actually out and trying to push the sort of limitations of experience and resources and equipment and all of that.
Right. Now, one of the things to say is, we have you down and you agreed with the credit of writer-director, as opposed to a director who also writes his scripts, So do you see yourself as a writer first or as where the story is paramount to your films?
I think that, speaking strictly for myself, and other filmmakers might have different opinions on this, if you are writing the film that you're directing, they very much go hand in hand, and that you are writing the film 3 times. You write it on the page, and then you write it a second time when you're shooting, and then you write it a third time when you're editing. Mm-hmm. So even if you've not written the screenplay, even if you're a director working off of another script, you are still writing throughout the entire process.
Right. Gotcha. Now, but with that, though, here's one other thing I would ask you, is because of budgetary problems that independent films have, do you, before you write a script, and let's say you start with an idea and say, well, this is the story I can tell on this budget. If I had a bigger budget, I could tell more of this story or tell it differently, or in the midstream, I should say, of the film, you have to do rewrites to go along with what you have at hand as well as the diminishing funds that you have.
Yeah, I mean, there are always concessions that have to be made along the way. Different filmmakers, particularly on the independent level, as you were saying, they approach their projects in different ways. Sometimes they say, this is the story that I want to tell, and if I don't have this location or I don't have the capabilities of doing X, Y, and Z, they actively pursue those elements. But they're sort of handcuffed to finding those things. I tend to work from the other direction, which is that I look at what I have access to. I look at the places where I can film, the people whom I can include, and typically in thinking about those things, that's what creates the spark. That's where the initial inception of the idea comes from. And then from there, it's just telling the story.
Right. Now, then we'll get in, I guess, to another thing that was on IMDb that kind of intrigued me. It was a trivia thing, but you can tell me if it's true or not. This is, he always has in every film a character named Zoe or Zoe.
Zoe, yeah, I have always included that character name as just sort of an Easter egg until Butterfly Kisses. I broke the
There's no Zoe in that film.
There is no Zoe in that film. There is actually a prop that I specifically had made. It was a poster for a local band, and it's such a blink and miss it sort of thing in the film. Yeah. But the fake band on the poster is called Zoe Chainsaw. So I figured I slid the name in there somewhere.
Somehow.
Yes.
So it has no special significance of why you always use Zoe. Like where did that come from for you?
There's a screenplay that I wrote for a film that's sort of my dream project, and that in making various features, starting with Roulette, now with Butterfly Kisses, I'm constantly trying to go up the staircase. And this is one of the films sort of halfway up the staircase that I really, really want to make. And the protagonist's name is Zoe. And so as I began working on other screenplays, whether they were for films that I've produced or screenplays that I have sold to other filmmakers or what have you, I've always slid that name in sort of as like a good luck charm, sort of a rabbit's
I was going to say, I was wondering if it was a good luck thing, because I think there was a tradition in Hollywood that not everybody knows, but from my vast watching of films, is that many films, it was a good luck thing if you mentioned Baltimore. Baltimore comes up in a lot of the old movies, even if it's just as one line, oh, we were in Baltimore, or that happened in Baltimore. And I think that's, something that Hollywood threw in there. And I said, even then, we're kind of an obscure town in the 30s and 40s, so come on. Why did they say Baltimore?
Then hopefully Butterfly Kisses will be a massive success because the name Baltimore is all over the film. So.
Right, and Ellicott City.
And Ellicott City, yes.
I think people of Ellicott City should give you a nod for that film, especially since unintentionally a lot of your footage is pre-flood.
Yeah, and actually we've wanted to do some sort of a screening around the time that the film is released in the fall, specifically in Ellicott City and for the local businesses and the local people, because the film is in many ways a love letter to that area. I grew up out there, and one of the things that was very fascinating to me about Ellicott City, aside from the fact that the historic district is beautiful, it's incredibly atmospheric, with the cliffs and the river and all of that. There's also the fact that that entire area is known for being haunted. Whether you believe in ghosts or you don't believe in ghosts, the folklore aspect was something that always very much inspired me, specifically as a fan of horror films. And as you said, there was the terrible flood that occurred in the summer of 2016, and we got most of our footage prior to that. So all of our footage of the historic district is before that terrible incident. So we made a point in the credits of, giving our love and dedicating it to the people of Ellicott City, specifically the business owners who lost their wares.
Well, it was great because there were a couple quick shots that you have in there of the black and white footage of the two characters, Feldman and the girl, I think, in the wagon wheel, with the wagon wheels on it.
Yes.
And the wagon wheel was pretty much wiped out by the flood.
I have not been back.
That's what I heard.
To
I don't
some
think
of,
he's reopened or not.
I know a number of those businesses have not reopened. I've been down there once or twice, and it's unfortunate. You know, I mean, again, it was that whole area was sort of where I hung out as a teenager.
Oh, okay.
And a number of those shops no longer exist. The Phoenix is there, but Coco Lane, which used to be one of my
Coco Lane was a famous restaurant.
I used to do sort of creative writing sessions over there at Coco Lane. I would do beverages into the late night and discuss craft, and it's no longer there, and it's very, very unfortunate. It's very sad.
Yeah, and you also have a scene which again it's a glimpse. I guess one of your other watering holes, Red Brick Station.
Red Brick Station, yeah, that is actually probably my favorite place in the world to go, and I've been going there since they opened in '97. So I'm showing my age at this point, but
yeah, man, believe me.
Red Brick is it's a place where I go for literally every single film meeting that I have, whether that's in pre-production or in post-production. If we're sitting down and we're discussing what we're trying to do, whether that's working with the crew or working with the actors or what have you, we go to Red Brick. That's the spot. So the owner, Billy Blocker, was very kind and let me come in and film there. And again, that's sort of I try to, being that this is very much a Maryland movie about Maryland folklore and Maryland businesses and all of these things, and Maryland public figures.
Right.
I wanted to, nod as often as I could to the places that I love.
Now let's get into it a little bit more, because a lot of things I want to talk about with the movie. Where did the idea for Butterfly Kisses come from, and why did you pick that name? Because when I did the search, there's so many movies or short movies named Butterfly Kisses.
The name was chosen because thematically it makes sense within the context of the film, but also because just on paper, as you're saying, it is a very ambiguous title.
Yeah.
And because it's so ambiguous, it hopefully, if I've been successful, it makes you want to watch it to figure out what that's all about. What does this mean? Even if you watch a trailer for the film, which I just cut, the name Butterfly Kisses still isn't, outright explained. And it's like, well, I need to see this. I need to understand how A, B, and C fit together.
Right.
The concept of the film came to me in the fall of 2014. I had recently released my first movie, Roulette, and I was, again, thinking about what I wanted to do next and sort of putting together people, places, and things that I would be able to sort of utilize for a next film. And I saw a trailer either on television or in the movie theater for a found footage movie along the lines of the Blair Witch Project or The Last Exorcism or Paranormal Activity. Or
one of those.
One of those. And immediately, as is both a blessing and a curse for me, I tend to look at these, at films or newspaper stories or whatever, and my wheels start turning in terms of the nuts and bolts behind them. And I started thinking to myself, if somebody actually did discover a box of discarded footage, found footage, as was the premise of the Blair Witch Project during the late 90s when that film came out, and people thought for a few minutes that it was real. They thought it was a real documentary.
Right, exactly.
And all of these subsequent found footage movies have sort of taken that same tack. You're watching, real footage of a real alleged supernatural activity involving the disappearance of or death of the filmmakers. And I thought to myself, if someone really did find this footage, what would be the real life journey from discovering it to watching it to vetting it in whatever way to believe that it is actual legitimate footage rather than someone's unfinished horror movie? What would be the steps that you would take in order for it to end up ultimately in a movie theater? Would you take it to the police? Would you, what would you have to do with it?
Right.
And that's where the entire concept came from.
Because I guess it gives an idea of a little bit of the plot to people without giving it away. Part of it to me, too, is to say that it can be seen as sort of a faux documentary. It can be seen as a horror film in a way. can be seen as a mystery also in a way. So, I mean, do you have a concept of the genre that you feel it best fits in?
I think if you put it down on paper, the easiest way to describe the film is being a horror film. It is a faux documentary. It is a mockumentary. I love horror films, but by that same token, This is Spinal Tap is my favorite comedy of all time. I love the Christopher Guest movies.
Right.
And so yeah, it's sort of a strange mashup of styles. I would describe it as being a horror film, but I don't know that it's 100% a horror film. It is as much entertainment as it is, I believe, a critical analysis of that particular subgenre of horror. It's looking at these sorts of films and saying, we are self-consciously and self-reflexively commenting on the tropes. What are the conventions of this genre? What are the things that stand out? What sets it apart from other horror? What is it that makes it believable or not believable?
Because for me, I see anything you could even approach as a point where horrificness is towards the very end of the film, as to what happens to the two young filmmakers in 2004. But my take on it was more, you know, you talked about the type of film, but I think it's also some, I don't know if you want to use a metaphor, but about filmmakers.
Yes.
Because it seems to me that there are three sets of filmmakers, and they all become obsessed with this subject. Because the kids do, she starts off saying, I'm making this student film project. And then it's something that grabs them, and they get caught up in the whole thing about Peeping Tom. Then you have Gavin, who is the wedding filmmaker who looks like he wants to make something big. And so you have that kind of obsession and desperation I see in his character. And at the very end, Eric, the filmmaker who you play, at the very end, even though it's left kind of ambiguous, it looks like he's caught the bug. And you could see, if you wanted to play in your head, now he's going to go down a chase and see if he can catch Peeping Tom on film, that he has gone beyond doing this film about Gavin to where it's grabbing him, whether you could say it's Peeping Tom or something has now roped in this filmmaker.
There's a lot to be said, I think, for the subtext in the film, which is, as you very rightly pointed out, it's a film about filmmaking in so many ways. And specifically, the creative bug and how that can take over our lives. Making independent films is very different from making Hollywood films. Right. As I said before, we all have jobs, we all have lives, some of us have families, and it is a process that can take several years, and that's several years of carving out time in order to do this. And so it has to become a priority, and especially for a filmmaker who is asking cast and crew to do the same, to give their time during limited numbers of hours in the day. You have to be able to deliver a final product. So many films are started and they're never finished. You not only have to deliver a final product, but you have to deliver a final product that is worthy of their time and investment. So it does lead to a certain level of obsession, for lack of a better term, and it can influence relationships. It can influence marriages. It can completely change your social life for good or for ill. And I wanted to comment on that in Butterfly Kisses from the sort of three levels being, you know, the film school experience, the I'm an adult and I wanted to be a filmmaker and now I think my window is closing forever, right down to the third story, which involved myself and my crew, which is, you know, we're sort of established professional filmmakers, but by that same token, we can't have this project that we're making fall apart. There's a lot invested in this for us. We're trying to go onward and upward.
Right, because, I mean, especially when you talked about showing the stresses, you see that in Gavin at home, where he finds out about how his wife's family have been supplying the money, and he's been using the money for the kid to finance the film, and their marriage seems to be estranged, and it seems a little bit, again, ambiguous as to whether she's left him or not. You know, and to say that you can see this is the strain, again, of the obsession and sort of like you said, the buck, you know, passed me by and now I'm never going to be a filmmaker, but I want this so bad. Because it's the other part you get into with the DC 101 and Ed Sanchez calls in, the whole thing about the skepticism of the public. The guy has got to the point where you're so into it, whether he actually believed it to begin, he's bought into it to the point where he wants to believe so much that it's real, that you can have that whole thing of the story or the trope of one man against the world. He's the one person that has the truth, and nobody believes him.
I think that every artist can say that at some time in their lives, whether they're filmmakers or they're writers or they're painters, dancers, musicians, whatever they might be, the only way to truly be able to create is, again, to be somewhat obsessed with your work. And the only way to truly be obsessed with your work is to love it passionately. It's like it's like creating a child and carrying it and bringing it out into the world. Often, what we love about it is so many times in our heads. We can only describe something that is unfinished. We can only describe our dreams that we've not yet realized. We know where we're going. We know what we're going to make, but people around us don't have that vision. They can't see it or hear it until it's there. And it can be a case where people around us don't necessarily believe in what we're trying to do or don't understand the importance of it, and so therefore don't offer the emotional support or significance that the artist feels they need in order to sustain themselves. So often we need that attention and that support. I'm not speaking strictly of myself, but it seems to be a common theme with so many people that I know. And that was a thing with Gavin's storyline, is that he has something in front of him that he's 100% convinced is going to make him a millionaire. And everyone around him is just looking at it and going, this is just some dopey horror movie. What is this? Nobody cares. But he sees it, he believes in it, and his passion ends up alienating everyone around him.
Well, there's no belief because people say, oh, you faked that. There's some experts that say, oh, he probably faked that footage of the guy rising up out of the end of the tunnel kind of a thing.
Right.
There are so many ways you can do this trick, people say on the film. And so he gets discounted in a lot of ways. Until, I don't know, I guess these guys are real, the sound company guys that you talked
Studio
about.
Unknown, yes.
Studio Unknown, and they do this thing, what they think was supposed to be like the Morse code,
Yes.
and then it becomes a visual, and it's the guy with the cloak and the top hat and the whole thing. And I said, well, maybe he did have something, but at that point, Gavin's missing or dead at that point.
Exactly.
And so he doesn't get justified. Now, in the movie, and I'll have to ask you about whether it really was this case, where it says, we don't, for Gavin and for the character of Eric, we don't have an ending to this film. Did you go through that struggle at any point to where you said, I don't know how I'm going to end this film, or you had different endings for this film?
No, it was always the same ending, and part of what I was commenting on there is the fact that many films in the found footage genre sort of build to an anticlimax. There's a common issue with trying to find a satisfying ending to a film of this sort, and they typically will end with people running through the woods or running through a dark house or something like that, holding cameras, and there's lots of screaming. But there's no big reveal, and it tends to end very abruptly. And I was trying to comment on that, while at the same time having the film include at the ending running through the dark, running through the woods, and screaming and yelling and things happening. And so that it was very, very self-reflexive.
Now, did you have, like most independent filmmakers have, did you have budgetary restrictions or production challenges because of the budget?
Absolutely. And, the only way to get around those is to do a lot of favors, show a lot of gratitude, and wear many, many hats. It's really the only way to pull these sorts of things off.
What I saw is that since the type of film you did, it was a great way to say, okay, how can I make a good film on a low budget using, intentionally, as you said, unknown actors, real locations in many cases, if not all cases. The fact that there are some little glitches in the filmmaking you see from time to time, which even if they weren't intentional, you could leave them in because you could say some of them, except for the last crew, are semi-professional filmmakers or amateur filmmakers. So if you see a little blip or a rough cut or something, then you leave that in and say, boy, we don't have to do another take on that. So that, I think, worked to your advantage on that. How can you fit a micro budget and make a good film?
Absolutely. And that's always the struggle, but that's often the reward. It's art through adversity. What do I have right now? How can I make rub two nickels together and make it look like $1.
Yeah. Well, mention something about your casting then.
I can't really talk too much about the casting right now because we are sort of waiting for the film to be released in the fall. We're getting very close to ironing out a final deal on that, at which point, when the film is released, we definitely want to make sure that we throw a spotlight on everybody involved in the movie.
Well,
But
maybe not their names. I'm saying your casting choices. You don't even have to say who they were or why you picked them. Say, what kind of actors you were looking for and that sort of thing. In general terms.
We populated the film with so many real people playing themselves, right down to myself and my crew, that in terms of including individuals who were not playing themselves, in terms of having actors, it was important that I had people who were very, very experienced, particularly with improvisation. And so a theater background was more important than anything else. But I wanted to make sure that they didn't have much in the way of a film presence in terms of, a resume where they would be easily recognized. I wanted to make sure that I had people who knew what they were doing, but also had a very, very strong theatrical background.
Okay. Because with the acting, I was going to ask you, or you mentioned improvisation, with the scripting, I meant to say, that how closely scripted was it, or was it more like, this is the theme, this is what I want you to talk about, and now go?
It was a little bit of yes and yes. There was definitely a screenplay, and typically we would do about 3 takes, and it was important to me that we did one that was on book, and then we did one that was slightly off book, sort of say everything that was there, but feel free to color it and embellish it a bit, and then there was a 3rd take that was just run with it. And part of that, though, was that there were elements in the script or there were elements in the story that I had that were not in the script. And that was by design so that I could sort of spring things on people on camera and have them react to them and not have any premeditated response to it. So there was a lot of that. In a lot of ways, the film was a very heavily scripted improvisation.
Okay. Now, the other thing I know from a previous interview you said you wound up with about 3 hours of footage that had to be cut down in half to an hour and a half. Now, what were the challenges in getting it down to that 91 minutes and say, well, I didn't leave all this behind that was necessary to the story? Were you still able to keep your bare bones, or did you kind of, edit while you were editing, you were really shaping your plot and your story?
It was a battle for clarity. That was the main thing. 90 minutes tends to be the commercial standard, particularly for independent horror films. And so we managed to get it down to 91. But it was a 3-hour assembly, or just shy of 3 hours. And the process involved working with my co-editor, Kenny Johnson, who was also the cinematographer, and just mercilessly cutting fat, or in some cases, cutting tissue as well. But we tried to get it down as short as we possibly could, and the Frederick Film Office very generously did a fantastic test screening of an unfinished version of the movie. And they brought in viewers who had no idea what movie they were going to see, and they were given comment cards. And there was a Q&A afterward involving, a moderator. I was hiding in the back. I shaved off my beard so I wouldn't be recognizable. And we just heard what people thought of it, what worked, what needed more explanation, what didn't work. And that was very valuable. And at the same time, we were also showing the film to other people, other filmmakers, getting their feedback. And so it was a long and arduous process to get it down to 91 minutes.
Because as opposed to some other films which maybe tell a straightforward story, you are intentionally trying to leave some things ambiguous anyway, but you still don't want to lose the thread or totally keep your audience in left field because you cut out too much.
Exactly. So, like I said, a battle for clarity. It was making sure that the ambiguity was not too ambiguous. It was making sure that things were not overstated. And it's difficult with a film like this. It's difficult with any film. You never know if you're too on the nose or if you're spoon-feeding an audience. But this film literally was the most difficult thing that I have ever edited.
Right. And then, of course, with every independent filmmaker, what have been your issues with, or what would you want to talk about with distribution for this film?
There haven't been any issues. When I released Roulette, that was a film that had what was considered maybe a bit of a lengthy runtime. It was an hour and 52 minutes. There were some distributors who wanted to cut the film down, again, to get it to a nice 90-minute runtime. There was also some content in the film that caused viewers to react perhaps negatively. Some very, very touchy sequences dealing with abortion specifically. And so some distributors were a little bit afraid of it. It was also a film that dealt with Russian roulette, and this was after Sandy Hook, and it had a lot of buttons, a lot of hot buttons in the film.
There you go.
And so that was a question of just trying to find a distributor who would release it uncut, and we did, and that was successful in that regard. With Butterfly Kisses, this is a very different film from what I did last time. It's a more playful film, I think. It's more fun. And we are having absolutely no problem courting offers. It's just been a question of, it's been an embarrassment of riches. It's been sort of, what's the best opportunity for this film? And
will there be a theatrical release?
That's a good question. I'll let you know.
Okay, please do. Now, what about upcoming projects? What do you have that you can talk about?
I've got some things that are percolating right now, and nothing I can really talk about other than I've been having discussions with some collaborators. I've been having some discussions with some producers, and I've got about 3 projects right now that I'm sort of putting on the table and saying, all right, what's the most viable option at this moment?
Okay, and here's a good one. As a closing question, but I'll have one other question, is that will you remain a Maryland filmmaker, or if the opportunity comes, will you go Hollywood?
I don't know that I'm ever going to go Hollywood. I don't know that opportunity will ever be on the table. But I can safely say that the paradigm has shifted in such a way that a person doesn't need to live in Hollywood to go Hollywood.
Or Atlanta.
Or Atlanta. Films can be made anywhere. And, I think actors and a lot of crew people are going to be more tempted to go to where the work is, the regular work is. For a filmmaker like myself, I could go anywhere for a couple of weeks or months and make something and then continue to finish it here. Okay. I don't foresee myself leaving Maryland.
Well, terrific, because that's why I've been doing this series on Maryland filmmakers. We want to try to keep you all right here, but to get you all known.
Absolutely.
Beyond David Simon, beyond John Waters, beyond Barry Levinson, and maybe Matthew Porterfield.
Sure.
We want the other gifted people to be seen.
Well, we appreciate your efforts.
Thank you.
Much.
What I want you to do is then look into your camera and give people your contact information.
You can find me on Facebook, E.K. Myers. You can find me on Twitter at E.K. Myers. That's EKMYERS. Butterfly Kisses Movie on Facebook. Find me on IMDb as well. I'm very easy to find on social media.
Okay. And another thing I think I ought to let people know is that this film will screen at the Maryland International Film Festival as the opening film on Friday night, April 27th of this year. If anybody can get out there, please go and see it, because it may not be in a theater or on some kind of platform until around Halloween. But I want to thank you, Eric, for being here today.
Pleasure was mine. Thank you.
You're welcome. And folks, that's the end of another TV Free Baltimore film review. And until next time, we'll see you.
We hope you're enjoying your visit here this evening. Now, on with the show.
Hi, this is Cindy Williams, and you're watching TV Free Baltimore.
This is Gunhild Carling, and you are watching TV Free Baltimore. You are not watching. You have to watch TV Free Baltimore.
You're watching The Paul Stefan Show on TV Free Baltimore.
Hello, this is Paul Stefan, and we're here tonight to talk with another Maryland filmmaker. And we're happy to have with us tonight Chester Stacy, production designer. Hello, Chester.
Hey, Paul. Thanks
How
for
you
having
doing?
me. Oh, I'm great. I'm great.
And we'll just briefly go over and say, hey, we know you're a local guy, right? You're from around.
Yeah, Canton. Not far from here at all.
Oh, that's good. And your studio is also near there.
Yeah, I can bike to my studio. It's in Highlandtown. It's actually it used to be an old meat smoking factory,
cool.
So it's a neat space.
That sounds pretty cool.
You come check it out sometime.
We definitely will. And the thing we want to know too is a little bit about how it all began for you. You know, where you got your artistic inclination, how you started, and I didn't even get far enough to say, did you go to high school and college for design? But we'll get into that too. But talk about how it all started for you.
So I'll go back to kindergarten and I'll reference the Christmas Bazaar poster contest that I entered and won. And
good.
My poster was the advertising poster for the bazaar that year of our elementary school. And that included everyone from kindergarten to 5th grade.
Wow.
So it was actually, my head got kind of big, kind of quick. But along the line, I always was drawn to art. I would draw in my free time. I certainly loved creative expression. It was supported by my parents, and I eventually learned somewhere along 5th to 8th grade, somewhere in there, I knew graphic design was it was called commercial artist then.
Oh yeah.
I was going to date myself a little bit. It's called a commercial artist, but it's now a graphic designer, same thing. But I was like, yeah, that's really cool. I would love to design logos, or I would love to design, the forms that we look at and see, every day.
Right.
And
to bring that in a little bit is to say that I collected graphics. That's one of my collections. And to me, the great, what I call and I used to use this term anymore, American illustrators.
Absolutely.
They did magazine covers. Look at Norman Rockwell.
The Evening
this guy,
Post, yeah.
Edward Penfield, who I really like. Maxfield Parrish. These kind of guys that were commercial artists.
Illustrators,
and
absolutely.
Illustrators, they were called.
Beautiful.
And of course, now it's graphic arts.
Yeah. And that art is, I know a gentleman, Art Landerman in Columbia, who's still a genuine illustrator that you can hire to completely conceptualize and draw something that does not exist, that you can't take a photo of, basically. Anymore, though, the computer has replaced a lot of those illustrators, because what those illustrators were usually doing was creating the most idyllic version of an image. The Norman Rockwell image on the covers of the Saturday Evening Post, like you mentioned, were the most glorified image of whatever that subject was. The rosy-cheeked individuals, the whatever, was quite, idyllic. And now you can do that in Photoshop. I can take a photo of the kid that's actually crying and sort of make them look happy. I mean, it might not be perfect, but you know what I mean. There's a lot of that tool has shifted into.
It's a whole different skill set.
It is.
Because if somebody can just create it from their mind with maybe, a pen, an art pen and something, and create it.
And it is. Now, I will say this: the computer does not replace the artist.
Right.
The ability to draw and visualize is still a key part. The computer is only a tool. It's another type of paintbrush.
Right.
It's just in our tool belt. It's another item there. Right. And I think that a lot of people fear the computer or digital or whatever, thinking it's more than that. But it is just a tool, and completely under our control for us to manipulate and use to our own devices.
Do you feel that what's going on, like you just said with the computer, is an artist better if he or she starts with pencil and paper or pen, and then later does it the computer, or they just jump right to computer? I mean, I'm saying, does the actual physically doing train you in a way that it wouldn't if you just went right to computer?
Paul, that's a great question.
Okay. Let's give a thoughts.
Yeah, I don't know the answer, but I would say
Speculate.
I would certainly say that there is something to the coloring book that we still give to young children.
Right.
Although I have seen the iPad version of a coloring book or the tablet version of a coloring book. So But that still is a tactile thing. So yes, I think the tactile part is still a part of it. Whether I'm dragging the mouse or dragging the pencil or crayon, similar movement is there. So either I think could come first. That's a good question.
Because you did say you were a transitional figure in that you used to use those kind of tools.
Yeah.
And you did the hands-on stuff.
Oh, I learned graphic design by good old cut and paste with wax, hot wax, and glue, and layers of ruby lith, and you had to create separations for your art, literally your CMYK layers. And then the computer was coming along at the same time. I was learning those tools, and that all was replaced and changed, and certainly a much more efficient way to generate precision art. Especially for like advertising and marketing and that type of graphic, which generally didn't have a soft feel, had a more of a mechanical or precise feel.
Right. I mean, part of I think where it gets a dirty name too these days is with, you mentioned Photoshop, and that people say, I see a photo either online or I see it in a newspaper or magazine, and I bet it's been manipulated. It's not real. That's not the person. There was the whole controversy years ago, or not that many years ago, about them slimming down models.
Oh, sure.
In magazines, and that's not what she really looks like. And
right.
People like Amy Schumer fought against it, and other people, and other things too, where you can take. I say with for book covers, for example, like for novels and things. They'll say this picture and that picture and that picture, 3 pictures, and make a composite. And that's the book cover. And it makes it look like one picture that was all done. Like they took the sky from here, they took the person from here, they took something else from there, and put it all together.
Sure.
Whereas before you had to frame it with this, your eye, and all those things had to actually physically be there.
Right.
And that's a change.
It is a big change. And you bring up a good point in that audiences now are more savvy to that as well.
Right.
And it means that we have to hone our craft all the more. We aren't given the grace. They're like, oh, I see your edge of your green screen there, or oh, I see the the visual effects you use there, or what have you.
Right.
Because they know, okay, I see how you did that, or I can do that too with my phone to a degree, or at least I understand the principle.
Right. That's true.
So the accessibility to these tools, I think overall, I would say is a benefit, and probably coming at them the sooner as you can is better, just like any proficiency. But probably at the same time. I think the hand with the crayon and the hand with the mouse, we sort of circumvented all the way back around.
There you go. Now, did you go to a special high school for this, or take courses in high school? You didn't go to like an arts high school or commercial arts?
No, I was public school all the way through high school. We did have a little bit of electable credits, I guess, in my senior year, and I certainly did focus on some art studio time, and I had some like free studio time, things like that. Right. Not until college did I really have a track, and in college it was a fine art major with what they called a specialty graphic design, and I was a theater minor.
Oh, okay.
And I actually spent a lot of time at the theater. I probably spent more than 50% of my time in the theater rather than the art studio. I was dedicating a lot of energy to both. But I certainly was dedicating more energy to the theater, even though it was a minor, and I was falling in love with the microcosm of the theater. The fact that I did a little acting in college, and that was cool and exciting and thrilling. I also worked with the tech and worked behind and learned a lot more craft for theater tech, not only building sets, painting them, designing them, but also lighting them, running the mechanical electrics, the whole ball of wax, literally the microcosm that is the theater. So I think that was something that also was always underlying, so that when I was out in the world in my career as a graphic designer, I ended up working in large format print.
Okay.
Commercial printing, murals, billboards, giant printing, basically. An art director who was working on The Wire came into our shop and introduced herself, had some copies of some plans. The shop I was working in, we also did architectural reproduction, so copies of blueprints and things like that.
Okay.
Everything was large that we did, but that was another particular service. And she had drawings that I recognized immediately as set drawings, and I was like, oh, this is cool, and we chatted a little bit, and then she remembered me and I worked with her a few more times on a couple different things, producing the political posters for The Wire when Carcetti was running, and they had all the political posters. That was one of the things that our shop actually printed for this particular art director. And I noticed what she did, and I sort of, paid attention, and knew her for 4 or 5 years, and some of that helped me understand what it is to be an art director, and then even higher up the production designer, and making some of those choices about what you actually see on the screen for a TV or film production.
Well, did you then actually work on The Wire besides just doing posters? Or?
The only work I did on The Wire was always related to print production, or as a subcontractor, basically providing some sort of unique printed product for The Wire. I later worked on House of Cards. At the end of The Wire, I produced a bunch of canvases, really high-end. They were Giclée type canvases, which is a type of reproduction, a very high-quality reproduction of the portraits of the mayor from the Capitol or the town hall in Baltimore.
Okay.
City Hall, and they're life-size portraits of past mayors, and they're quite detailed. And for the set that they had built, they wanted complete replicas, and I helped produce those.
Okay.
And in producing those, it became a very intimate relationship with the set decoration team, the set dressers, the art direction team. I was invited to the set to see how they were being implemented, to make sure the materials I was using were going to work well. I was doing some of the stretching and building the rear frames, the stretcher bar frames, that they were then covering with a more beautiful gilded frame. But still, we had to all work together. So that really triggered my mind. And that was well after college and everything, and I was like, oh, this is a really fascinating gig to be involved with, creating the space that people will see for a particular moment. And the production designer is responsible for absolutely everything that you see, really, except for the actor's body, because under the production design sometimes often is wardrobe or costume design as well. It's really like the head visual artist, and then, or the head visualizer, and then there are brackets beneath that: art director, costume designer, etc.
So I don't think a lot of people are aware of that, because you talked about a little bit about that off camera too, and that's what I want our audience to know about, is that the production designer is really one of the top credits up there, with like the director, the screenwriter, the DP, all those people. You have to work with all of them. And it is, and I think you alluded to, but we'll get you to expand on it, the production designer is a way, his or her job is really to help tell the story.
Not to tell the story. I think to visualize.
Visualize the story. Excuse me,
yes,
that is a better way of putting it.
And I make that distinction because certainly the director is trying to tell the story and use all of our capacities in our microcosm to come together to do the best job to tell that story, using the visual and audio medium of film or television. We'll add smell soon.
Okay. Well, there was smell-o-vision once in the John Waters movie.
But in that, the production designer is relied on, and yes, it's usually a top credit. It's usually a front credit. Sometimes on the front splash screen.
Okay.
It's often on the poster. But if you want to really think about what it is, it's one of the hardest working jobs, because you start early in the process. A lot of pre-planning and pre-production.
Yeah, you're in pre-production.
Because you got to essentially visualize and work with your location scouts to have spaces and or modify them if they're going to have any sets built in them or things like that. Of course, obtain all of the materials that you're going to use to do so. It's essentially a mini construction job, as well as a management of inventory, because you're also doing props. Props fall under production design.
Wow, yeah.
And that team. The picture cars fall under literally every item that you see, except for the actors, is under the umbrella of the production designer. Now, the production designer, of course, doesn't touch and see every single one of these items. There's a team. Art director is going to lead more of the visualizations of, some graphics or any signage or particular plot point text that we see and things like that. Of course, your wardrobe or your costume designer is going to work directly with those items using a guidance that the production designer has created. So we usually have a palette that we create.
Do you work with the lighting designer?
So we work with, so lighting is separate. Separate gang.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly the influence of the tone of the space has been talked about at some point, but usually, okay, this is a tough question to answer. A lot of the productions I've worked on have been independent productions, non-union, with somewhat less structure.
Okay.
That being said, absolutely the lighting designer will have at some point worked in pre-production and looked at our spaces, and we will know our color tones that we're looking for.
Right.
In the real world, most of the time, that meeting is happening, he and I, or she and I, on the set the week before we're going to be doing that actual scene. So, reality versus what you would desire planning, a little bit different. But yes, all of us come together to collaborate on that visual. And the director is, of course, the head of all of this, and the director has passed down to myself, hey, I had a thought of this palette, can you refine it and see what we get? And we might select several blues to be our dominant and then use some pops of a certain red, and that will be a signature throughout our production. Or any other pairings of particular colors that we feel work well. And the red is often great. Blue and red are often used in like the slasher type because it makes the blood contrast really well.
Right. Well, I guess to clarify why I talked about, or actually said that the production designer helps tell the story, I think of what your design looks like or what your set looks like. It's like telegraphic to your audience in the sense that it sort of tells part of the story when you're setting the scene. It's say, okay, This is this type of room, or let's say, simple example, odd couple that this is the sloppy guy because of the way his apartment looks, or this is the neat guy because of the way his apartment looks like, and you're looking at objects. You're not looking at actors in a space. Maybe even the shot might just open on an empty room, but looking at the set, it's going to tell you a lot of things. There might be a calendar on a wall or books on a bookshelf, things that tell you something about, even gives you maybe background about your character or your lead character.
And even some exposition.
Yeah, an exposition sometimes.
I like your point, Paul. I'll concede to it tells the story, but I like visualize.
I understand that. I'm just saying that's where I went astray. You're the expert. I'm just saying.
I like the idea that what you're saying though too. Of course, the best film can do a great deal just with the visual.
Right.
Now, and it can be silent, but there can be actors there, and there can be a very powerful moment.
Of course.
Just in stillness.
Right.
The art of a director that can pull that out, that's the real key.
Right. Now, in the work that you have been doing, because you have given us some distinction of the variants of what's a set director, I guess, and what's a production designer, and a set dresser.
Mm-hmm.
They're all different.
Yeah. So set dresser is more about the moment to moment after we've already decorated and fully designed a space and fully decorated it, it's ready, the director has approved it. Then during takes, the dresser is repairing things or replacing things that have gotten out of continuity. So if the TV gets turned on in the scene and then we rewind, the set dresser literally will go over there and turn it back off, or their team will. So the set dresser is sort of babysitting the set.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not trying to belittle this as a huge task. It's incredibly important, and it is the responsibility that you put to a babysitter, because it's like, okay, make sure this child stays exactly as I left this child with you. And it's the same thing. Please make sure this set stays exactly as I left it with you.
Right.
So I would sign off on the space and leave it with the set dressing department while it's being shot. And they are in control of that space and are making sure it stays in that look. That's one distinction of one of those jobs.
Well, that's important because, I like the way you said it was continuity, because in the old days, a lot about old movies, continuity was the script girl. Say,
and it still is a script supervisor is in charge of continuity and works directly with the set dressing team.
They work together.
Yes.
Because I know a lot of people, on some movies, they say, they check for the bloopers and say, look, for example, the microphone's here, but it was just over there in the last scene, and it should have stayed there. I mean, sometimes they don't catch everything. And we're talking about major Hollywood productions.
Absolutely.
You know.
Because honestly, there are many, many wheels in motion at any one moment on a set. And, when the camera's rolling or not, as soon as the camera's not rolling, there's almost more activity often of all the people resetting the different elements of an effect or, a prop. I mean, anytime something breaks, I mean, those resets are, the resets are an enormous amount of activity that nobody sees. And then a stillness, we're all calm, we're back into the moment. Then if there's a huge moment, then it's big or whatever it is under action. But yeah, there's an amazing amount of activity that occurs in the space while nothing is being recorded.
Right. I mean, part of what I was going to say too is there's a difference between what most people see, which are the big Hollywood productions. What are the challenges for a set designer on a low-budget indie?
Well, certainly, of course, you're usually wearing more hats. And yes, I'll have less people on the team. I might have one person that's doing props. I might have one person that's doing set dressing, and then another PA and myself. Maybe one more person. And in that scenario, the big difference, a little bit more responsibility on fewer shoulders. So you get some trip ups and things like that because it's too much of a load for certain individuals, certain times, myself included. I've certainly made mistakes under those kinds of scenarios when you're sort of tackling one more task than you should be at that moment. At the same time, it's thrilling to be in a moment with, for example, an effect going off and a sound cue and a weapon cue and a car and and multiple things like this. And when they all do seamlessly hit and you get it on the third take and everyone loves it, it's pretty darn cool. Yeah. I certainly am not one though that likes to go. I look at the frame to make sure that it is the image that we all decided we wanted to see and has appropriate framing and cinematographer and I agree on that, or camera operator or whatever term you want to use for whoever's lead operator. The other thing I do though is I don't really look at it afterwards. I'm not interested in seeing what we caught or looking at dailies or any of that. I need to see at the beginning, and then all the rest of it, my job is done.
Oh, okay.
I don't want to see the edit. I don't want to be involved with the edit. I don't want to hear about anything until later when I go to the screening or the premiere.
I was going to ask you, because it's a visual medium, as you made very clear, how closely do you usually work with the DP?
Very closely, certainly. And as a matter of fact, the DP and I will often approach a moment where the director said, "Oh, can we do something different here?" And we will then, right there at that moment, grab some other props, figure out a new angle. The last production I was just working on in November in Kentucky, similar type of thing happened. The DP had a great idea of us coming from behind some large blue glass, some historic blue glass, which put a great color filter across the lens as we tracked behind it and then revealed the actors. And it was a real quick setup. We had some use them, and here's how we can do it. And so, I had them. Yeah. We had them in the space. He made a suggestion. I was like, yes, that's a great idea. We also worked with the grip at the moment, adjusted the lighting to then, pop a reflection there, and then, So yes, definitely worked with the production designer really is going to touch every aspect. I've taken the watch pins out of watches for actors to adjust the size during a take, because I often have a lot of tools as well. Because like I said, we do carpentry and welding and electrical and general, not electrical for the lighting, but like literally if we need to do some electrical work on the set, our department will do that. So. A lot of people will group us and call us the art department. All usually include wardrobe. That usually is just props and the set dressing team and set decoration team. But really, we have a lot of stuff. So people come to us for, oh, you guys have tape. Oh, you have glue. Oh, you have markers. Oh, you have fill in the blank. And we do. Screws, nuts, hardware,
There you go.
whatever.
Well, part of it too is I was reading it was amazing. It says a production designer really has a control or at least responsibility for a good piece of a budget on a film.
Absolutely. Because of the prop investment and the material investment. And often if you are in charge of, setting up the transportation directly, the transportation vehicles, not for moving actors around, but for use in picture, certainly you can pick up a quick tally up a quick budget there.
Right.
I've worked with a range of budgets. I've worked with budgets on 8-minute films of $1,500.
Okay.
And I've worked with about $17,000 on a 3-week movie. And this recent one was quite a bit more. I don't actually know what our final budget was on this recent one, but I would put it closer to 40 grand, something like that.
Was that for The Night Watchman?
That was for Starlight.
Oh.
Which is a whole nother film.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, part of it too, I was going to say that I think sometimes, when you're talking about budgets, is to say that a production designer has to be a magician, maybe. I'm saying part of it when you talk about small budgets, say, what are the tricks? How do you make something look more expensive than what it really is?
Oh, sure.
You want to make a set look, boom, this looks like Hollywood, like it's a $100,000 set, and it may be a $10,000 set. How do you get away with that?
So
to have the same look.
So again, there's the collaboration with our DP. Let's make sure we're framing what we definitely want to see and what we don't want to see.
Keeping it out of frame.
Keeping certain things out of frame.
Right.
That's usually the somewhat more critical in keeping the magic or the high level quality of it. Something that may either gives away a modern element, especially if you're doing a period piece.
I was going to ask if you were doing have ever done a period piece.
Right, so that would be a big telltale right there. Certainly, the framing is key.
Okay.
The perspective and the framing. Knowing the shot list, of course, too, for that day or for that set is helpful too. If we're going to really be 360 in it, then you're going to have to invest a little bit more. If we are not going to be looking at all sides, or if we're going to only have certain perspectives, or if we only need certain points of view, or the storytelling moment is big and grand, but is going to be only a twofer or only a few certain frames, then we know we can put our money in where that close-up is going to land.
Okay.
So we'll put our money into a higher finish or a higher detail, level 5 drywall there, use a foil, use literally a higher grade material there, or your feature prop or the piece that you invested the most in, et cetera, et cetera. Again, literally filling that frame precisely where it is. So that's the first part about it is the framing.
That's the real secret.
Yeah.
I guess the other part, in recent years, because of the digitalization of filmmaking, that I would say a lot of times you'd be low budget films always were traditionally more in actual locations or on locations, real buildings as opposed to sets and stuff. And I don't know if indies are still maybe more doing that than studio productions. And to say the challenges of that, are pretty much the same. You might say, we got to do this. And, well, let's see. Well, you send the guys out looking for a location. Well, we'll find something to fit the script to say this is an old house or whatever we need. Or if not, you can, again, I guess that's the framing. We can find a room. Oh, this looks like it's from 1900 or something.
Yep.
Because I don't know if you keep up with everything that's going on, but one of the things that amazed me, and one of the areas was production design, was this recent series I liked, a mini-series that finished last night, The Alienist, where they were trying to make, it was very much looked like it was supposed to be, which is 1896 New York.
Right.
And a lot of it were real buildings and real locations, obviously, because it's TNT. It's not like, it's not a big budget thing.
Right.
And, it did construct some amazing outdoor sets, but still, I'm just saying that you have to sometimes choose.
Yes. Certainly, indie film predominantly, I would say, uses found or predominantly 90% ready-to-go spaces. If we're doing some manipulation, it's to modify something that's existing. We're trying to do the least new construction, of course, as possible, and use, of course, the least resources in that sense. Very common. Paint something, put a coat of paint on it, just like the realtor says when you're trying to sell your house. It's the same thing.
Right.
You freshen it up. That's an easy trick. It's very inexpensive.
And I think part of that is you would learn that from your time in stage work, because in set design on stage, it's the way you might paint your flat or whatever.
Sure.
That would set your mood, and that would then transfer to film if you had that stage background.
Sure. And I still use faux painting directly on a film set all the time too. So we'll have damage occur, or an actor is supposed to damage a door specifically, like they punch it or something, and we want to create a mark that's the same every time. So I've had an actor punch something, and then I have carefully painted that a few other times on copies of panels of a door, so we can swap those out, and they're the same thing. But it comes down to that faux painting technique is really helpful there. There's really no other way to copy that really quickly, other than good old, old paint and now unique materials. Sometimes we'll throw some. If there was blood on the actor's hand, like artificial blood, we'll use that in our coloring too, so we get the same kinds of materials and things like that. But yeah, a lot of DIY, a lot of on your feet thinking, a lot of problem solving.
Yeah.
Certainly, I think making a set look grander or more expensive or top of the line or very Hollywood has a lot to do with the framing, like I said. Has a lot to do also, though, with the care in that original selection. If we've looked at that space and found the right framing and then spent a little bit of time dressing it, it's amazing what you can make happen.
Great. Well, what would be any upcoming productions or projects that you're going to be involved with that you can talk about?
Sure. So I also do theatrical design. And I'm currently working on the design for Alice in Wonderland being produced at Chesapeake Shakespeare Company.
Wow.
On Calvert Street.
Of course, I know exactly where it is.
Yeah.
The old Richardsonian Romanesque former bank.
Yeah.
Red brick.
Yeah, the Mercantile Trust. It's a double. That actually, the structure is quite unique. You talk about spaces. That's a double wall building. So, yes, I'll be
you're doing
designing
that
Alice in Wonderland for them. And we have I've sent in the preliminary sketches. We have an organic theme, so it's very like large scale flowers and moss and toadstools and sort of like you're the size of an insect in a garden.
Oh, so not quite Tim Burton-ish, but sort of.
Yeah, it's in that vein. It's in A Bug's Life or Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. It's kind of that
kind of thing. Wow,
idea. There's a couple of ideas going on.
And you have any other things that you're
I'm also working on concurrently an outdoor art installation for the Columbia Mall.
Okay, great.
And it strangely has a similar theme. It's it's an outdoor installation in their food court. And it is designed to look like there are these triangular banners that are overhead, designed to look like you're walking under blades of grass. So again, like you're an insect size.
Wow.
So both of these ideas happened literally at the same time, and I do this all the time. I borrowed from my own idea. I'm working on another project, and I was like, this is kind of a cool idea. I'm going to use it for both. So both of these projects are using the same sort of idea of scale, looking up at large flora and grass.
Terrific. Terrific. I'll just say, well, this is fascinating. Of course, like we always say to everybody that we like who's come here, we want you to come back. And even, like I said, we can film at your studio and you can show us around where some of the magic happens. It's sort of your dream, dream factory.
I'd love to,
we'll
Paul.
go to. So now tell us, please, in that camera over there, what your contact information is, where people can find Chester Stacy.
Sure. My name is Chester Stacy. I own Chester Creates, LLC, and I am a production designer and theater designer, and I also like to call myself a design engineer. My contact information is chester.stacy@gmail.com, and you can also find me on Facebook. I have a web page for my company, Chester Creates.
Great. Well, thanks for stopping in our humble little studio tonight. It was great having you.
Thank you, Paul.
Okay. And well, folks, there we go. I always hate to end it, but this is the end of another Paul Stefan show, and tune in next time for another fascinating guest. Good night.
You're watching The Paul Stefan Show on TV Free Baltimore.
name is Jeff Bama. I guess I'm a self-professed history dork. Anything I get my hands on, I try to read it, and for whatever reason, I can retain it. I always try to find what else. So when I moved to Fells Point, all I ever heard about was the War of 1812. War of 1812, War of 1812. Some captain stayed here, War of 1812. I started looking into a couple of the buildings and started to stumble upon a history that was pretty ridiculous. So let's face it, murder and mayhem always makes for fun stories. So I would start leaning more towards that and started to find a underbelly of Baltimore that is often not talked about.
And what is that underbelly?
The underbelly is essentially the origin of, or continuation of the name Mobtown. And why is it called Mobtown? There's really no mob here. What's the story behind it? And through research, started to find that prior to the Civil War, Baltimore was a very bloodthirsty and just nasty, nasty place to be. Pretty much the 1830s, 40s, and 50s, you have Baltimore increases its population. It almost quadruples in size. That puts some social strains on. Baltimore was only second to New York and to Ellis Island for immigration. That starts to put strains on resources.
Okay.
And some tension starts to build. And out of this tension, you start to get bands of young kids that are up to no good. Baltimore's starting to rip at the seams, politically speaking. The Plug Uglies are a nativist American club that forms in the mid-1850s over on the west side of Baltimore. They tend to ally themselves with the American Party, which is an anti-Catholic, anti-immigrant party. These young kids that are hanging out on street corners tend to congregate around fire clubs. So Baltimore did not have a fire department that was paid for by the city. They had the volunteer fire department. It was a pretty big to-do when there was a fire. Everything had to be poled by the men. So you have large groups of men pulling the fire apparatus to the fire as fast as they can. You have other men carrying hooks, ladders, carrying buckets, whatever is needed. It became a massive spectacle, and as a young kid it would have been pretty awe-inspiring. They used to have bands that would follow them and play songs. They all dressed the same. It was something to break the monotony of your life, and it started to help bolster neighborhood pride. It also became a criminal enterprise. If you got to the fire first and put it out, you got neighborhood clout. People would buy you drinks everywhere you went, but you also got to rob the place.
So the people putting out the fire will get to rob the building that they just put the fire out of.
Yes. With good intentions, it starts to turn into a more sinister take on things. And around the 1830s, it starts to be two clubs racing as fast as they can to get to a fire.
Wow.
Now, when they get to the fire, they would fight, and it's starting to get more and more violent.
This almost sounds like it was like a war zone.
It starts to become a war zone. Once politics starts to become involved, now the stakes get raised even more.
And how did it go from firehouses to politics?
Well, politicians started to realize that these young, brave men who are willing to do anything, commit murder, fight, rob, steal, you can use them. Baltimore's elections were kind of flawed in and of itself. If you control the area in front of the polling house, you control the election. Politicians realized this, and they started to attach themselves to the larger fire companies, the tougher, the ones with the worst reputations. The way polling works is you have a window, and you have to make it to that window and hand them a ballot. So everybody knew who you were voting for.
That's what I was going to say. It's not private like it is today.
The problem with it is you have to get to the window. So if you control the window, the area in front, you control the election. So the Plug Uglies, the Double Pumps, some of the other street gangs would stand in front of the window with muskets, carpenter awls, knives, bats, pile of bricks. Here in Fells Point on Eastern Avenue, they brought a cannon. They would stab you as soon as you walked up. One of the famous practices here in Baltimore was the coup.
Let's see if I can explain cooping in 30 seconds or less. Ready? Go. Innocent bystanders would be picked up off the streets by gangs, thrown into basements, and force-fed alcohol and drugs for about 3 or 4 days. Then, the gangs would make these people leave the basement and go and vote again and again and again. And in between the votings, the gangs would make them switch clothes, cut their hair, and pretty much do anything to change their appearance. Many did not survive this ordeal. Did I make it?
Estimation, how many times would they run a person through this?
There's quite a few accounts. There's a guy who was kidnapped here in Fells Point, a German. He was voted 16 times. The belief is that Edgar Allan Poe was voted 33 times.
Wait. Edgar Allan Poe?
Edgar Allan Poe.
Okay. You gotta tell me this.
One of the famous practices here in Baltimore was the coop.
Innocent bystanders would be picked up off the streets by gangs, thrown into basements, and force-fed alcohol and drugs for about 3 or 4 days. Then, the gangs would make these people leave the basement and go and vote again and again and again. And in between the votings, the gangs would make them switch clothes, cut their hair, and pretty much do anything to change their appearance. Many did not survive this ordeal.
The belief is that Edgar Allan Poe was voted 33 times.
Wait, why do you say that?
He was also found at a polling house on election day. He is drunk. We know what happened in the coup. Or he was on drugs. We know what happened in the coup. Clothing and whatnot.
It's interesting, but it's coincidental.
While cooping is the most likely reason Poe died, there are many theories out there that range from alcoholism, hypoglycemia, suicide, murder, overdose, and even rabies. Each theory has their supporters and detractors, and due to that, Poe's death may forever be considered an unsolved mystery.
There's 2 letters. One man says he was in the coop with Poe and Poe was in bad shape. There's another letter that a guy named, it's labeled as a certain Pisano, admitted that it was his coup, and he supposedly went and apologized to the family and admitted to it.
Really?
The family always said that they believed he was couped. The letter goes on to say that Poe was voted 33 times and that he was given a heavy dose of laudanum. He was a little frail man, and he started to fall out as they were driving him around. And they essentially said, he's a dead man, he's no good to us. And they stuck him in a cabin and got rid of him.
Now, it's Edgar Allan Poe. Edgar Allan Poe is very famous. Wouldn't they have known that they were grabbing Edgar Allan Poe?
Well, let's go take a look back at our young kids. They're apprentices. They're not schoolboys anymore. They're dropping out of school. Most of them are illiterate. They didn't know who Edgar Allan Poe is, nor did they care. They needed to accomplish the winning of an election, and if he was there, they would have took him. And they were so violent, even if you were a judge and you knew it was Edgar Allan Poe, are you going to speak up?
We're here in Baltimore today visiting a local brewery that's brewing up more than just beer. It's brewing up history. Let's go. Now, why beer?
Went to Europe to do a postdoc in molecular biology and just fell in love with the different beers, the different styles, and the beer culture. Different from England, Belgium, Germany, let's say.
Why did you choose Edgar Allan Poe? Why did you choose The Raven?
Well, when my future partner, Wolfgang, suggested we do an American theme, and I'm from Baltimore, and the first thing that popped in my head was Edgar Allan Poe. And I've always been a Poe fan. If you look at each story and you maybe look at the labels themselves, we have symbols of of the stories on the right and left of Poe, here in this case pendulums, for Pitt and the Pendulum. And with the cask, the bottle you have over here, you've got brick and mortar and chains where he tackles a person against the wall and bricks them in mortar and bricks. So you can do a lot with Poe. Kevin Gallagher, the political cartoonist for the Baltimore Sun and the Economist magazine, he does all of our artwork. Cal wanted to focus on Poe, and he emphasized a very large head. And every label, Poe holds the glass that fits the style of the beer. On the right and left of Poe are symbols of the story. On the side, we always have a tagline, a cut above the rest, being Pendulum Pilsner. It never skips a beat, his telltale heart. On the back of the label, we have a line or two from a particular story.
Beginning in the early 1930s, the Poe toaster, a black-clad figure, will go to Poe's grave at Westminster Hall, toast Poe, then leave 3 red roses and an unfinished bottle of Martell cognac. This practice continued until 2009.
You sometimes host Poe-themed events here. Why?
I kind of like to support literature and the fine arts in general. I am also a board member of the Poe House in Baltimore. The last event we did was a fundraiser for Poe Baltimore. Poe Pints and Poetry,
yes.
right.
It's a very, very nice event.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Steve Darnall, the publisher of Nostalgia Digest, and you're watching TV Free Baltimore. Well done.
The Desposil is on my shore, Maryland, my Maryland. His torch is at thy temple door, Maryland, my Maryland. Avenge the patriotic law that fleck the streets of Baltimore, and be the battle queen of yore, Maryland, my Maryland. Thou wilt not cower in the dust, Maryland, my Maryland. Thy beaming sword shall never rust, Maryland, my Maryland. Remember Carroll's sacred trust, remember Howard's warlike thrust, and always love the thrill the just, Maryland, my Maryland.
This concludes another day of live stream broadcasting from TV Free Baltimore.
Media, an illusion of choice. Do you know that only 6 corporations own 90% of the American media?